um, yeah. Okay. Uh, Hope everyone's doing well. Uh, yeah, we've got some stuff to go over. Uh, some stuff was a little bit harder to find than others due to, like not getting like any coverage really at all outside of like a couple places. Um, and like just also very briefly touched on as well by like if at all. Um, so yeah, for those who haven't heard already, there's been a gigantic derailment in Ohio, which is kind of crazy. So we're gonna start off with that. So yeah, like I guess we'll
The
just
CBC
start off
Surgical
with that.
Action has been looking into the latest on this as of now. So, Sarah, what do we know?
Well, Andrew, today the National Transportation Board saying that the investigation continues. They are currently looking at surveillance video to try and help determine the cause of this train derailment. And once the tanks themselves have been completely decontaminated, investigators will move back onto the scene to try and investigate and examine them further. This did happen 9 p.m. Friday on February 3rd. 38 cars derailed. There were another 12 that were injured, or pardon me, damaged in the ensuing fire. In total, there were 20 cars as part of this train that were carrying hazardous materials, and 11 of those were among those that went off the tracks. This forced the evacuation of at least 2,000 residents in that area. Initially, the derailment.
So here's the thing with the derailment that had happened. The rail workers had in the states had been saying for like 3 or 4 months that if they don't do anything about the safety of the rails or the cars, I should say, and that this exact situation would have happened. It's not the only thing that they were asking for. They were also asking for um, like paid sick days off. I think it was like 5 a year or something like that, which is like nothing to begin with. But yeah, like they've been like the rail workers have been telling this fucking company and like the U.S. government and everything that if things aren't taken care of properly and not up to standards, this exact thing would have happened. And like the plume or the gigantic plume of smoke that had happened to come out of all this. I don't remember exactly what chemical compound it was that they were traveling, but like even that wasn't like labeled properly either, from what I understand. Um, they but yeah, like the giant plume of like dark smoke and everything that uh had happened over um like East Palestine, Ohio, ended up like uh is like now like causing like acid rain and everything. And like even before that, like allegedly there was like cows and chickens and stuff that were like dying as well, which should already be like a red flag and everything, because that's it, that leads to that will lead to other outcomes for sure. It's just kind of funny that they just not really paying any attention to it. And like initially they were all evacuated and everything, and I believe the town was given like $2,500 or something like that, which ended up being like maybe like $15 per person to return home or for damages and shit. I'm like, that's ridiculous, right?
And the dangers. But then several days later, there were concerns there would be an explosion. That's when we saw these towering, black, dramatic, billowing clouds of toxic smoke. It was part of a controlled release of a highly toxic vinyl chloride, which was released into a ditch. It was ignited, and then you see the smoke. It's an attempt to dissipate into the environment. That led to all of the air quality testing to determine not just if the outside air was safe, but they've been air quality testing with inside the homes. That continues today, though the number of homes that have been done to this point, it has been deemed safe, that the air quality was fine for residents to return.
But like the thing is that it literally won't, because the thing that we've seen time and time again when it comes to incredibly toxic materials, when it comes to train derailments, or just like companies pushing their like really toxic chemicals into like rivers and shit, and like illegally dumping and everything, ends up hurting a lot of communities and causing like abnormal birth defects and shit later on down the line. So the thing is that like I honestly don't think this is, you know, going to end anytime soon. Like sure, they say it's safe, but that's just more or less like in order to get people to go back to their houses and not and like be like, no, don't worry about it, you're gonna be fine, despite the fact that there's literally been acid rain within East Palestine within like I believe like the last couple days or something. Like the company's just lying here, because instead of like actually paying their employees a decent amount of money, giving them paid sick days, and like actually following their recommendations, they engaged in stock buybacks, if I remember correctly. So that's always fun.
Andrew?
So is enough being done, though, to ease some of the concerns
No.
of residents?
Well, we heard right at the top there the concern about water. To that, the water utility has increased its water treatment, and it's saying that the water quality that they're seeing right now has not been changed, though they have set up a secondary intake in order to provide an alternative water source to the Ohio River, should it become necessary.
And here's the thing, like we're pretty bad with fucking getting water to or getting clean drinking water to in-need communities. The States is also pretty fucking bad at that. So the thing is that these people who are going to be inevitably affected by this are it's going to remain like this for at least a good 20 to 30 years. Because like what do you think that like the American government gives a shit on these people who are living in East Palestine that, you know, it has been affected by this? Fuck no. Like it's surprising that it got any news coverage at all, to be perfectly honest. Like I really had to look for it. And like the only like there has been like some instances like this, but like I think that mainstream media is doing more of a a cover-up job to protect the company more than anything, and being like, no, everything's fine, despite the fact that, you know, rail workers had literally said this exact thing was going to happen. And like the only really the only people that I've seen like talk about this like overall broadly has been like Hassan, and then like a couple other independent news sources. Like that's pretty much it.
But with each passing day here, and a number of days have passed, certainly residents are learning more about the number and the types of chemicals that were on board this train. And as that list continues to grow, so do the concerns that they have. I want to play a little bit more.
Understandably.
There's been, I think, just an ever-changing mix of emotions and feelings just right from the outset, just the amount of unknown that was there.
Hi.
And then as things became more known, it was not better. They were finding more gases and chemicals. We have 4 kids, ranging from 2 till 15. And it's a lot to try to manage.
Like that's another thing that like a lot of these mainstream outlets haven't really talked about either, is like, yeah, sure, the chloride vinyl or whatever the fuck the main chemical was is going to be incredibly fucking bad, but there was like other chemicals involved as well, which is inevitably going to cause even more damage to the community, and will have long-term implications. Like, it's wild.
And keep them comfortable and happy and also safe at the same time, and keep your own sanity through the whole situation.
Just yesterday, which was 10 days after this derailment happened, the state senator J.D. Vance acknowledged the concerns of residents, as well acknowledging the pictures that have been circulating on social media and in reports of residents talking about dead chickens and seeing dead fish. Part of the lengthy statement released by the senator reads, "I have heard alarming anecdotes about contaminated waterways."
And like the funny thing is like a lot of these politicians are just just trying to push this off, being like, no, don't worry about it. It's literally nothing. It's just a couple dead fish and a couple dead farm animals. Don't worry about it. It's gonna be fine. Despite the fact that usually when local animals are dying from unknown causes, it usually means that there's like either a virus or something going around, but usually that's only one species, not like 5. Or there's a gigantic amount of pollution within the area that will inevitably affect the people living there as well.
And effects on wildlife. I encourage anyone with credible reports of environmental harm to contact my office. As well, there has been a lawsuit filed, a federal lawsuit filed in hopes of forcing the rail operator to set up long-term health testing, health monitoring for residents in this area.
Like, the sad thing about that, though, is that I honestly don't think this will happen, because no one holds any of these companies responsible for their negligence. And it's incredibly infuriating that it just doesn't happen. Because in this instance, yes, or just like overall, like especially in this instance, though, they should 100% be held accountable.
Operator, Norfolk Southern, has said as of today $1.2 million has been either given out as cash advancements or reimbursement to those many families, Andrew, who have had to evacuate.
Oh no, they got reimbursed. They only got like $15 though, which is like literally nothing. So don't worry about it. They were reimbursed. It's all good now.
All right, Sarah, thank you.
People living near the site of a toxic train derailment in Ohio are clear to go home. But even after being told they can safely return, many in the community are still choosing to stay away. Here's the scene, a dramatic...
And like the thing is that I don't actually blame the people who don't want to return home because they say that it's, safe to return home. Like, they don't want, I think what it is they don't want like a gigantic pool of people who are who have lost like their area of residence to go and like make things like over I guess the terms that they would use would be like overcrowding or something like that in like other communities, despite the fact that this was 100% preventable. Like it 100% was.
Pictures of the derailment when it happened nearly 2 weeks ago near East Palestine in Ohio. 20 of the train's rail cars were listed as carrying hazardous materials. The urgent threat were the 5 cars leaking vinyl chloride, explosive, known carcinogen, but that was really just one of several major concerns.
They weren't labeled either. Don't forget that the vinyl chloride wasn't labeled either.
Let's bring in Heather Gillis because she's looking at things.
They were classified as not not explosive and stuff. So don't forget about that.
What exactly was in those rail cars, what is happening now, and what people in the community are saying.
Well, Heather, residents in the community, they're feeling unease, they're feeling distrust, they feel like they don't have a lot of information. There will be a town hall for residents of East Palestine, Ohio tonight to allay some of those fears that they're feeling. The village of about 5,000 people has been in a state of emergency since 50 train cars derailed. That was back on February 3rd on a Norfolk Southern Railroad train. Now, residents are worried about the chemicals that were spilled and later burned off and how they will affect
Rightfully
their health.
so.
Officials are concerned about chemicals including vinyl chloride. Now that is a volatile, colorless gas. It has links to some cancers and it can turn into hydrogen chloride when burned. And about 1 million pounds was released into the air. The Ohio Governor Mike DeWine says they did a controlled release of the chemicals, which were in danger of exploding. They burned them off, which discharged toxic.
Yeah, and so them burning this vinyl chloride off and making giant plumes of smoke, or very deadly smoke, ended up creating clouds and ended up releasing all of that stuff that they had burnt off back down. So like it literally didn't even matter. If anything, it made like the situation potentially worse because they were dealing with like hydrogen chloride or something like that. Like it's incredibly dangerous on what they were doing. Like they didn't handle it well at all. Like I've been hearing like some people calling this incident like the Chernobyl of like Ohio or something like that, which both have like similarities, but both are also drastically different too.
And potentially deadly fumes into the air last week. Now, residents were evacuated but could go back to their homes about a week ago. The Environmental Protection Agency has been monitoring air quality and says it hasn't detected levels that are concerning to health. Residents, though, worrying about the long...
They were lying, by the way. There were reports saying that this would be concerning for health.
Long-term impact on their homes.
Because like I said, they engaged, like the company that that's responsible for this ended up, engaging in stock buybacks, and they're a multi-billion-dollar company. Why the fuck would the American government not have the back of the corporation in this instance, compared to like what, 5,000 at most, like 5,000 people? Like, no, it's they don't give a shit. Like, they honestly just see these people as like fucking biomatter. They don't give a shit. What?
Environmental activist, a famous one at that, Erin Brockovich, you might remember her from the movie with Julia Roberts, says that residents haven't been getting all of the information that they need.
This is a situation where the people don't trust at all. And I would have never advised the community who'd been evacuated to come back home until you had an all clear. They were told to come back home too soon. They now don't believe that it's safe to live there. Many won't come home. And now a big disaster. This has been mishandled. It's out of control in the state. And I really believe at a federal level, this administration has to get involved.
100%.
She is calling for Congress to act. So is Ohio's governor. Now, the mayor of the town, Trent Conaway, says the town hall that will be held tonight will give residents an opportunity to ask questions and get some answers. And that starts at 7 p.m. local time.
Heather, the concerns obviously around these toxic chemicals, these pollutants and contaminants. What is the status of the safety for the air and the drinking water in East Palestine? What are the latest readings and testings? What are officials saying about that?
Officials are telling people it is safe to return home, but residents are still worried.
I wonder if officials have any other reasons or any other reasoning on to tell these residents of East Palestine to return home and that it's safe.
Still distrustful. Some, when they go home, they're reporting burning eyes, feeling nauseated, headaches, and a pungent plasticky odor hanging in the air. The EPA says that smell can linger, but with chemicals at lower levels than are considered hazardous to health. The agency was testing indoor air quality and said it didn't detect anything. However, there is a letter from the EPA from Friday that says chemicals continue to be released into the soil and into the air and into the waters, with some reporting thousands of dead fish. However, officials do say the drinking water does remain safe in the state.
Like, I'm not even convinced by that. Like, you know, the claims of the drinking water remaining like safe and stuff, I don't even believe that, because like they literally said the exact same thing about Flint, Michigan. And we all know that like literally everyone knows that the Flint, Michigan tap water is like dog shit. And like the thing is that all of these chemicals that are seeping into like all the soil and inevitably the water supply is going to have effects for generations, unless, you know, it's not unless it's properly taken care of. But as we've seen, it hasn't been taken care of properly, and they're inevitably just gonna let these people die from like slow methods that will inevitably, you know, kill them. Like consuming a bunch of fucking toxic chemicals is not going to be great for literally everyone.
The governor says they weren't notified about these rail cars passing through their state. They're also calling for Congress to act on that.
Isn't that something that happens though? If not, that's or if that's like not the case, then something fishy seems to be going on.
While residents still very worried.
There's been I think just an ever-changing mix of emotions and feelings just right from the outset, just the amount of unknown that was there. And then as things became more known, it was not better. They were finding more gases and chemicals. And then a couple days later, the gases inside of these tankers were heating up. And that's whenever they decided to do a controlled burn. They evacuated the area. They put child endangerment charges out as a threat if you were in the area with your children. You know, it was alarming.
I mean, honestly, these corporations should be, or this corporation should be charged with child endangerment charges. It's not the people who live there's fault that the company decided to completely neglect any form of safety or regulations, as well as you know, listening to their rail workers who have been screaming at this company for a long time telling them that this exact situation would happen. But unfortunately, that's not going to happen. Because it's a lot easier to put the blame on the parents being like, oh yeah, no, you know, your kids should not go outside because this company fucked up and ended up endangering your children's lives. So, you know.
Some people still staying away from their homes near this derailment site where you can see heavy equipment crews working there. They're still fearful. It is worthy to note that no one was injured in this train derailment. Investigators say it was caused by a broken railcar axle. Heather?
Who could have foreseen that from happening? Or who could have foreseen that? Oh wait, that's right. The rail workers that were saying this exact thing was going to happen.
As the governor was saying, surprised, 12,000 trains a day carrying hazardous materials, 1.5 million tons of toxic chemicals through American communities. Reportedly, it's really shining a light on that situation. Heather, thank you very much.
And like, I'm not even convinced that people didn't die in this. Like, I'm sure that there have been casualties in it. Oh, there has. Yeah, we can watch the Democracy
Tonight,
Now one.
emergency crews desperately trying to get control of a potentially deadly situation with a controlled detonation. For 3 days, warning residents the burning wreckage of a freight train could explode, sending shrapnel and toxic fumes a mile in every direction over a rural Ohio community.
It's kind of crazy for a small town like this.
Thousands of residents under a mandatory evacuation order. Police going door to door, threatening families with children with arrest if they don't leave.
Police car came up and said, evacuate, evacuate, evacuate now, get out, get out.
Friday night, as many as...
I mean, fortunately, it did seem like the entire town was evacuated, so that's good.
The train's 150 cars derailed en route from Illinois to Pennsylvania. Today, the response focused on 5 cars carrying hundreds of thousands of pounds of vinyl chloride used to make PVC pipes and vehicle upholstery.
Bro, American news is wild. Like, they're framing, like, granted, yes, these chemicals are incredibly fucking toxic and shit, but like that's a little extreme, don't you think?
And also linked to increased risk of cancer.
Like this is just wild, bro.
To the CDC.
This is a matter of life and death. This controlled release will actually take place, and you are in imminent danger.
Officials again warning residents to stay away as they use small explosives to blow holes in the train cars, hoping the hazardous material will seep into ditches where it can be burned safely away.
We want to be able to...
Yeah, and then inevitably hurt the farmland that a lot of these communities rely on.
That situation. That's the safest way, is to control the situation, and that's with this operation we're going to take this afternoon.
I'm not convinced by that, to be honest.
Tonight, railroad officials declaring that operation a success, apparently easing the threat to this community as residents await word that it is safe to go back home.
Thanks for watching.
People living near the site of a toxic train derailment in Ohio are clear to go home. But even after being told they can safely return, many in...
We watched that.
There's a concern. The railroad has a serious concern, which they can express to you, about an explosion with one or more of these cars. They describe an explosion as potentially catastrophic and could potentially explode, causing deadly disbursement of shrapnel and toxic fumes. So following new modeling information...
I mean, it was, you know, the toxic fumes were going to happen either way, regardless of what they did, whether it exploded or whether they burned it off. So saying that, you know, they were going to burn it off and it wasn't going to cause any problems, like, that's already, like, you can already tell that's a fucking lie.
Information conducted this morning by the Ohio National Guard. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine and Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro are ordering an immediate evacuation in a 1-mile by 2-mile area surrounding East Palestine, which includes both Ohio and Pennsylvania. To alleviate the risk of this shrapnel, Norfolk Southern Railroad is planning a controlled release of the vinyl chloride at approximately 3:30 p.m. The controlled release of the toxic chemicals also has the potential to be deadly if inhaled. Those
Yeah,
in the
no
red
shit.
area, those in the red area are facing grave danger of death if they are still in that area. Let me just close by again urging everyone in Pennsylvania and Ohio who's in this area, you need to leave. You just need to leave. We're ordering you to leave. This is a matter of life and death. What's different now is we know that something is going to happen around 3:30. This controlled release will actually take place, and you are in imminent danger. You need to leave immediately.
All right, let's watch the Democracy Now.
DemocracyNow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez as we turn to Ohio, where residents of East Palestine are living the real-life version of the Oscar-nominated Netflix movie some helped make when they were extras in that film. This is part of the trailer for White Noise, about a suburban community that faces a so-called airborne toxic event after a train wreck causes a chemical leak.
Something that could actually kill.
Am I able to? Well, I guess it would technically.
Let's watch a sitcom or something.
So yeah.
Toxic event. It won't come this way.
Will we have to leave our home?
Yeah, it's like I'm honestly not surprised that there's been like, movies and shit about this, right?
How do you know?
Like it has to be there has to be like more, right? Like I'm sure of it. Cuz like it seems like the situation, like especially with like a lot of companies, like and like how they operate, like I'm surprised this isn't like a more prominent or predominant problem, to be honest.
White Noise stars Greta Gerwig and Adam Driver. But in real life Palestine, Ohio, fears of a wider health and environmental disaster are growing after a 150-car freight train operated by Norfolk Southern derailed and released toxic chemicals last week. Yes, in the community of East Palestine near Ohio's border with Pennsylvania. Data released by the Environmental Protection Agency shows the train contained more toxic and carcinogenic chemicals than initially reported. The EPA also said, quote, materials released during the derailment were observed and detected in samples from Sulphur Run, Leslie Run, Bull Creek, North Fork, Little Beaver Creek, and the Ohio River. The Ohio Department of Natural Resources estimates the spill killed more than 3,500 fish in surrounding waterways. Chickens have been found dead in their coops. Residents have reported sore throats, burning eyes, and respiratory problems. A controlled burn of the chemicals following the derailment sent a mushroom cloud of smoke and fire into the air that contained the toxic chemicals. Surveillance footage also shows the train on fire about 20 miles before it derailed with hazardous chemicals as it passed through Salem, Ohio.
Oh, right. I completely forgot about that. Like, yeah, no, it was on fire before then. Bro, how do they not notice this? And like, how do they not foresee this like exact problem happening?
Officials lifted an evacuation order for residents Wednesday, saying the air and water are safe. For more, we're joined by three guests.
Totally.
Ross Gruters is with us, locomotive engineer, co-chair of Railroad Workers United. Julia Rock joins us, an investigative reporter with The Lever, who's been following the derailment in Ohio Ohio. Her piece is headlined, "There Will Be More Derailments and Rail Companies Block Safety Rules Before Ohio Derailment."
That's true. It is true. The rail workers have stated that, it was inevitable that, something like this was that was going to happen because they don't follow regulations, and they lobby the government or lobby the they lobby the government in order to make sure that it so things they don't have to follow regulations.
But we begin with Emily Wright, a resident of Columbiana County in Ohio, a few miles from the derailment and explosion site in East Palestine. She's also the development director for River Valley Organizing, which is working with residents to call for justice-centered healing. Julia,
I'd be
Emily,
surprised if it actually happens. Because unfortunately, it just doesn't.
Chemically-driven environmental nightmare. What does it look like, smell like? Describe what happened when the train derailed and how you learned about how you had to protect yourself.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on. One of the the things that I really want people to know is that this event has kind of three parts. So Friday night, we had the derailment around 9 p.m. in between 9 and 10. And residents that were right at the site, were evacuated. Then the next day, they evacuated more people on Saturday because it was still burning. And at this time, we didn't know what was on the cars. We heard maybe it was vinyl chloride, maybe it was 10 cars, maybe it was 5. We really didn't have a great picture.
I wonder why they didn't know what was inside of these cars and how many it was. Oh yeah, that's right. They were labeled improperly.
Of what was, on the train. So we were told that if you were outside of that mile zone, you're okay. I live a few short miles. I think on the tracks, there's 5 miles in between where I'm at and where the derailment was. And, you should be okay. And they kept saying the same thing over and over again on the media and in the press conferences. There's no...
You should be okay, but we can't guarantee anything.
Toxins in the air. There's no toxins. Don't worry. Sunday night, we got an alert on our phone that there had been an additional explosion and that the fire was out of control again, which it never really was in control. We have pictures and videos that timestamp clear through that show it was burning. And to just be aware, like there was really no evacuation for us, just people that were a little bit further out from the radius. They were concerned on Monday morning that we were going to have an explosion. I will give everybody, this much, that the explosion could have been much, much worse. So they announced to everybody that they were going to do a controlled release. And I'm using air quotes when I say controlled. So they were supposed to do it at 3:30. My daughter was going to be on the bus route at that time. I already was experiencing symptoms I have asthma, so I was having shortness of breath already and was concerned, from that burn, I already had irritation. But when they did the release, they were supposed to do it at 3:30 p.m. They announced on a huge, press conference. Mike DeWine was there. All of a sudden, they stopped the press conference. They evacuated DeWine. We work with a lot of, we're nonpartisan, nonprofit. So we work with a lot of, both sides of the aisle, politicians, and had, got confirmation that he had been rushed out of there. The media was given 5 minutes to get out, that they were pretty sure an explosion was imminent. So they did not do the burn at 3:30. I can't tell you why. They did it 2 hours later. The problem is we had forecasted high
I wonder why.
wind gusts up to 45 miles an hour. We get a lot of wind in our area. The hills usually break it up, but it was announced that it was going to be very windy. So what they wanted to do was let it off earlier so the cloud would go. I'm sorry, one second, my voice. So the cloud would go straight up. It wouldn't span out. So they let it off late, and instead the winds caught it. It went over 4 counties, 4 to 5 counties
Wait,
in 2 states, actually 3.
wait,
Because the
what?
Panhandle of West Virginia was also affected. So we have Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, all affected by this huge mushroom cloud. You've all seen the pictures, I'm sure. We started in my home, just a few short miles away, experiencing nausea. Sorry to be explicit, but diarrhea. My father has bilateral asbestosis from working in the mill. So these industries are killing us in more than one way.
I mean, yeah, that's unsurprising, right? Like, of course, this is just like one way that a lot of these rail companies tend to operate, right?
And he could not breathe well. And, you know, I wanted to evacuate. We had family that was telling us to come, but then there was this massive shelter in place order put down. Do not be out if you don't have to, shelter in place. In the same breath, we're hearing on a press conference and on the news, this is out of an extreme abundance of caution. There's no toxins. There's no toxins. There's no toxins. There's no
Yeah,
toxins. That's all we
okay.
kept hearing. But the only thing I really want to highlight, and I'm sorry if I'm going on too much, is what we found out through the org. We've been on the ground talking with people. We're actually investing. Our offices are in East Liverpool, Ohio, which is just a little bit south of East Palestine. But we have a lot of members of our org that live like me in and around East Palestine. So we've invested in the community and are bringing on a couple organizers that are right outside the front door of the derailment. To work with people, because from day one, we've been fed what wasn't the truth. And now we find out with this EPA report that over 10,000 gallons of oil went into the ground, that the vinyl chloride was like double what we thought. And there was diethylene glycol, and there's other chemicals. Norfolk Southern, from what the EPA says, did not report this to the EPA in a timely manner. So we know this is.
Are we really surprised by this though? Like, it's just basic fucking corporation shit, right? Like, anyone who like claims that they're surprised by this is a fucking idiot, or has like no idea how like corporations actually operate. Like, this is just regular fucking corporation shit.
Emily, I'd like to, Emily, if I can, I'd like to bring in Ross Gruters as a locomotive engineer and co-chair of Railroad Workers United. Ross, your reaction to this derailment and fire, also this report that the fire had actually started before the derailment. What is the normal procedure that is supposed to occur in situations like this, and what your assessment of this crisis is at this moment?
Yeah, thank you, Juan. None of this really comes as a surprise. There's deep systemic issues. You talk about the normal response to an event like this. This isn't a normal event. And we really haven't seen anything like it in the United States, and probably not something like it since 2013. As you know, when we had the Quebec train derailment and explosion in Lac Mégantic.
And if I'm not mistaken, I actually think that there were some more regulations implemented and stuff like that. If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong.
There are deep systemic problems with the freight railroads right now, and those need to be addressed for us to have some sort of a normal response to events like this. And until we get at those root causes of the safety issues in the freight rail system in this country, it's not a matter of if these events are going to disrupt and really just what the people of East Palestine are going through is just, it's heart-wrenching. That's going to occur again. It's just a matter of when and where.
And what are some of the things that need to be addressed?
Well, at the root of it all is really cutbacks to staffing. You have companies that are making obscene amounts of money, and they're doing so by adopting operating policies. There's a whole system for this called precision scheduled railroading that is just designed to maximize profits. And what that means is
True.
you're cutting to the bone the amount of people doing the job. So you have fewer people doing a lot more work faster. You have across the board cutbacks on the maintenance of cars, on the maintenance of locomotives, on the maintenance of track. This is critical infrastructure. And those things are being done in many cases by skeleton crews or outsourced to subcontractors. And then you have increasing...
And it inevitably leads to, worse conditions for the rails, and like the maintenance isn't really up to spec and everything, and it will inevitably cause derailments, and it's because when you only have when your only objective is profit on the mind, you're not really going to be keeping a lot of important people around, despite the fact that they're kind of needed in order to make things up to spec.
Long and heavy trains like the one we saw here, where these trains have a greater propensity to derail. They're going to derail more frequently because they are longer and heavier. And then lastly, you have the railroads themselves who are fighting any kind of regulation, whether it be train control systems that help manage the signal system, or the lobbying efforts that we saw to kill electronic braking, which can make for safer operations and a quicker stop should a derailment like this occur.
We're going to go to Julia Rock in a minute,
Yep.
the reporter who's covering this for The Lever, but I wanted to give...
I mean, like, the same shit happens here, right? Like, it's not just an American issue. It's also an issue for us as well. And, like, the thing is that, like, we do have, like, a little bit more regulation when it comes down to rails. But for the most part, like, it's still pretty fucking terrible.
Emily, 30 seconds as you sit there, sometimes coughing, dealing with you're dealing with. And by the way, I can only say I think about Juan, his reporting after 9/11. You're talking about the EPA at the time, Christine Todd Whitman, the former governor of New Jersey, saying that after 9/11 attacks, the air was fine. And Juan's reporting led, exposing the lie of that, to the Daily News winning a Pulitzer Prize. So, Emily, your last 30 seconds on Democracy Now! Right now, what do you think is most important for people to understand?
Okay, the most important thing is that this is not a conspiracy theory. This is standard operating procedure for Norfolk Southern. They have 70 million.
I imagine it's probably standard operating procedures for other rail companies as well.
Safety violations since 2000, and they have 21 million in environmental, just in environmental. 25 million Americans live on an oil train blast zone. 25 million Americans. This is in the poorest parts of America, going from Conway, Illinois to Pennsylvania, cutting through Appalachia. They continue to do, safety issues, lower safety concerns, not worry about us, because we are the people that historically cannot fight back. So what we're going to do with River Valley Organizing is we're going to offer free soil and water testing to people so we can actually figure out what's going on. We have the University of Pittsburgh and the University of Kentucky on board to do long-range studies, because after the immediate aftermath, these people are going to need people to advocate for them. And, like I said, I have several family members that have cancer or asthma or COPD from these industries. and we really need them to stop killing us. And we told them 10 years ago, we told the EPA that bomb trains, this was going to happen. We had several collaborative organizations appeal to the EPA, and it happened.
Emily,
So
we clearly are going to come back to you in these coming days because there's so much to talk about. Emily Wright with River Valley Organizing, right next to East Palestine in Ohio. Ross, in 30 seconds, can you respond to the joint effort by the Republicans and the Democrats, the bill that was signed off on by Biden, the law prohibiting a rail strike and imposing a deal rejected by over half the unionized rail?
Oh yeah, that was another thing that was kind of cool. You know, bipartisanship for you know, making sure that rail workers can't go on strike. That's pretty cool.
Railroad workers. And then we're going to go to Julia Rock.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. Railroad workers have been fighting through the contract negotiation process for relief from the conditions, which are very stressful and very demanding, and have been exacerbated by precision scheduled railroading and the corporate greed. We've been trying to get relief from that. That would certainly help us in responding to and better managing our jobs to ensure that this doesn't happen. But this isn't going to be solved by one labor contract. It is systemic, and it needs some regulation. It needs regulators to step in and correct this, or we're going to continue to see things like what happened in Ohio a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I'd like to bring in Julia Rock, the investigative reporter with The Lever, who's been following the derailment in Ohio. Julia, talk about this issue of the railroad companies convincing government officials to repeal brake rules.
Yeah, so this is a story about the Obama administration attempting to require trains carrying hazardous materials as well as crude oil to install much better braking systems on the trains, electronically controlled brakes, rather than the air brake systems currently used on trains designed during the Civil War era, which stopped trains one car at a time. And first, the railroad industry fought the Obama rules. They lobbied really hard against them. They argued it would be terrible for business. It would negatively impact the fluidity of the nation's rail system. And then when Trump came into office, they turned around and pushed for Trump to repeal the brake rules that the Obama administration had enacted, which he did.
So we're talking about rules that went back to the Civil War. They haven't been updated?
I mean, most things
the brakes
aren't,
currently
right?
on America's freight trains are air brakes, which function by stopping train cars one at a time using pressure that travels along a pipe along the train. And that is a brake system that was designed in 1868.
Astounding. You have 10 seconds for a final comment about what people should understand about East Palestine right now.
So yeah, this is the result of efforts by the railroad industry to ensure that they do not have to retrofit trains carrying hazardous materials and crude oil with safety features.
Well, we want to thank you so much.
All right, let's jump up. Let's hop into some articles and that give some updates. I'm not too sure how accurate they're going to be, because there's been a lot of whitewashing of the incident. So, yeah. An overwhelming stretch of chlorine filled the air this week, where Nathan Veles and his wife have been raising their two children, quickly burning his throat and eyes. The odor has lingered nearly 2 weeks after a Norfolk Southern train carrying hazardous materials derailed near the Ohio-Pennsylvania line, igniting an inferno that burned for days and prompted evacuations in surrounding areas while crews managed destinations to release vinyl chloride, which can kill quickly at high levels and increase cancer rates. This was posted like 15 minutes before I started streaming, so kind of curious to see what's going to go on. Though an evacuation order was lifted last week, some residents refused to return amid fears the water, air, soil, and surfaces in the village of 5,000 are still not safe. And on Wednesday, Norfolk Southern officials announced they would no longer take part in a community meeting scheduled that evening about the situation, citing threats to employees. I think mostly why they're saying this is Norfolk Southern is saying this is because they've been getting a lot of scrutiny from this. Like, I would imagine, like, with through the community as well, but like even since like some people have actually done like bigger analysis on this, I wouldn't be surprised if those some people who watch those programs would also be criticizing them as well. We have become increasingly concerned about the growing physical threat to our employees and members of the community area around this event, stemming from an increased likelihood of the participation of outside parties, the company said in a release. Company officials had hoped to join local leaders Wednesday evening to update the community on the steps they are taking to safely clean up the accident site to provide the latest results from ongoing water and air testing. The release reads. Since the derailment, many residents of East Palestine remain plagued with anxiety. Some, like Velis, are spending small fortunes to try to keep their families safely away from the place they used to call home. My wife is a nurse, and I'm not taking any chances exposing us and our 2 young children to whatever is now in our town, Velis wrote on Facebook. The risk and anxiety of trying to live in our own home again is not worth it. On Wednesday, state officials again determined water coming from municipal system or multiple system was safe to drink after test results from 5 wells that supply the system covered by steel casing showed no contaminants. The Ohio governor's office said, yeah, it's totally not like, fucking the Ohio governor has lied before. The evacuation order was lifted on February 8th, 5 days after the derailment, after earlier air and water sample results led officials to deem the area safe. Nevertheless, worrying signs continue to emerge, including a newly public document that says potential contaminated soil has not been removed from the site, a critical step experts say should be completed quickly. so that the toxic material are not further dispersed into the environment and groundwater. I mean, I'm not really surprised about this, because like they wanted, like the company wants to do the bare fucking minimum, right? So yeah, it's mostly just shit we've discussed. Yeah, we can read this. It's a timeline of events. A small town in Ohio, approximately 120 kilometers south of Lake Erie, not too far from many cities and towns of southern Ontario, played a host to a nightmarish scenario earlier this month when a train crashed and exploded, spewing toxic chemicals into the environment. Residents who returned to the town of East Palestine after evacuation orders were lifted reported strange odors and dead animals, leaving some locals questioning if it truly was safe to return home. The Environmental Protection Agency maintains the air and water around the crash site is safe. Fingers are being pointed at Norfolk Southern, the operator of the train, for helping lobby against railroad safety regulations that could have mitigated the impacts of the crash. A new lawsuit aims to get the company to pay for medical examinations for locals in case there are any long-term health impacts associated with lead chemicals. There 100% will be long-term health impacts of that, because as we've seen with similar scenarios to like this, there always is, right? On February 3rd, a train carrying vinyl chloride and 9 other hazardous chemicals flew off the rails and started a massive fire just outside of East Palestine, a small town of about 5,000. No injuries or deaths were reported. The fire continued to rage through the weekend. Locals said little information was communicated to them until the night of February 5th, when forced evacuations began due to concerns the train wreck could explode. Officials said they observed a drastic temperature change in one of the rail cars and feared a potential explosion could send shrapnel flying up to a mile. The remaining residents in the town frantically packed overnight bags, and some were forced to leave beloved pets behind. One woman told the Associated Press that she left town a day early because her youngest son's eyes turned red as a tomato and he was coughing a lot after the train derailed. To avert the explosion, crews released the contents of 5 tankers full of vinyl chloride, an extremely combustible substance that is used in plastic production. Vinyl chloride is also associated with an increased risk of liver cancer and other cancers, according to the U.S. National Cancer Institute. As the toxic chemicals were drained into a trench, crews ignited a controlled burn to get rid of the substances. A loud boom was heard by reporters that afternoon, and the burn sent up massive plumes of phosgene gas and hydrogen chloride in a massive black cloud that was visible from meteorologists' radar. Phosphine gas is a colorless gas with a strong odor that can cause vomiting and breathing troubles. It is highly toxic and was used as a weapon in World War I. On Wednesday, 2 days after the controlled burn and 5 days after the derailment, officials lifted the evacuation order and told residents they could return to their homes. Authorities, including the Environmental Protection Agency, said air and water samples had been analyzed and came back normal. Investigators say the train derailed because of a broken axle. Security footage 20 miles back on the railway showed an undercarriage of one of the train's cars ablaze with sparks flying, raising questions about why the crew wasn't aware of malfunction. I wonder why. It's totally not like we just talked about that. As some residents began to filter back into town, as reported, they reported strange smells and dead animals. People were also surprised and worried by the sound of passing trains already running through the village again so soon after the accident. A couple who lived about 5 miles from where the train derailed spotted hundreds of dead fish belly up in the local tributary. Leslie Run. Other people reported dead chickens and shared social media photos of dead dogs and foxes in the area. An official with the Ohio EPA said material had entered the waterway and killed fish, but the drinking water was safe. Mayor Trent Conaway acknowledged people's frustrations with the lingering odors and promised the village is not just taking the word of the rail operator, Norfolk Southern Railway, and has EPA representatives involved in air testing. The village's drinking water system is being tested daily and is safe, he said. Totally. All of the readings we've been recording in the community have been at a normal concentration, normal backgrounds, which you find in almost any community. James Justice, a representative of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, said at a briefing on Wednesday. Norfolk Southern Railway is offering residents great air quality readings inside their homes and also said it would reimburse residents for the cost incurred during the evacuation, which was like $15. About 300 requests for air testing in homes have been received so far. Columbian County EMA Director Peggy Clark said, and yet some East Palestine locals are choosing not to return home and questioning whether it will ever be safe to do so. Some residents took to social media with doubts about handling of the accident and whether they can trust what officials are telling them about the safety of the town. A hazardous materials expert told local affiliate WBKN that he was surprised that residents were allowed back into the evacuation zone, a 1 mile radius around the crash site, so soon following the controlled burn. He speculated that 5 to 20 years down the line, locals may see clusters of cancer diagnoses. He urged residents to get a checkup as a record of their current health status in case of possible implications from the chemical spill down the line. Some residents said they have begun experiencing headaches and sickness since the derailment. A lawsuit was filed Thursday by 2 Pennsylvania residents who are calling for Norfolk Southern to pay for medical screenings and related care for anyone living within a 30-mile radius of the crash site to determine who is affected by the release of toxic substances. A lawsuit is also seeking undetermined damages. So, I'm kind of curious to see what Global is going to say about Norfolk Southern's track record. An investigation into Norfolk Southern by independent news outlet The Lever found that the company has laid off thousands of rail workers despite safety concerns about overworked and understaffed crews. We already know about that. The company also fought off a shareholder initiative that would have required executives to access, review, and mitigate risks of hazardous material transportation filling show. Again, I'm not really surprised by that. The Lever found that Norfolk Southern helped lobby the Trump administration to gut legislation that would have improved braking systems across the nation's railroads. The regulators specifically killed a provision for trains carrying hazardous flammable material to be equipped with an electronic braking system. Again, we already know about that. Norfolk Southern itself previously lauded this braking system, but nonetheless pressed regulators to repeal the Obama-era rule, claiming it would improve tremendous costs without providing offsetting safety benefits. Totally. Would electronic brakes have reduced the severity of the accident? Yes, said Stephen DeMeyer, a former senior official at the Federal Railroad Association. In an interview with The Lever, the railroads will test new features, but once they are told they have to do it, they don't want to spend the money. Oh, boo-hoo. Heaven forbid. All right, let's move on to the UFOs. So, let's...
China says they don't have any information on the flying objects that were shot down.
So yeah, for those of you who don't know, I wanted to talk about it last week. There was a Chinese spy or weather balloon shot down last week in which I found is kind of funny because, like, you know, if they're using like fucking balloons in like 2023, like, it's just kind of silly. And like the funny thing is like they probably knew about that balloon that they shot down either way, like the first one. And like when it comes down to that, like China has like satellites and like TikTok to, you know, spy on people and like get information and everything. The two latest, or the three latest ones, one was shot down in Alaska, one was shot down in the Yukon, and I believe the other one was shot down in Michigan. Chances are that they're not Chinese owned. Chances are they are privately owned, whether it be like by a company or like a university or like just some random weirdo who has like a lot of like extra money and shit. But like there are like plenty of like private balloons and shit. Like if I'm not mistaken, like I've read some articles that say that they were potentially like private balloons, but
On Monday, in a regular news briefing in Beijing, Foreign Ministry spokesperson
and like to my knowledge, I don't think China knew anything about the other three, right?
Wenbin said he had no understanding of the latest incidents and reiterated that the first balloon shot down by U.S. forces was completely an accident. He added that U.S. balloons had flown over China's airspace without permission more than 10 times since the
And like that's the funny thing is, right? Like because like when it comes down to like these balloons and shit, like China could just be seeing like, you know, like the American army is capable of and whatever, and like what their reactions are gonna be. Like clearly like they're fucking insane, because now they're just shooting like anything out of the sky that they don't know what the fuck it is. But yeah, like I've been hearing claims that you know, the three other things that were shot down were like fucking like alien spacecrafts and whatever, and you know, the government's trying to hide it up and whatever else bullshit. No, they're most likely weather balloons. They're most likely weather balloons or surveillance balloons. That's what they most likely are.
beginning of January 2022.
美方的气球飞往进入别国的领空，并不是什么稀罕事。就像我刚才所介绍的那样，仅去年以来，美方的高空气球未经中国相关部门批准，就10余次非法飞越中国的领空。所以美方应当改弦更张，反躬自省，而不是抹黑指责中方。我可以告诉大家的是，中方的处置是负责任的。
And like the funny thing is that like we and our allies do the exact same shit. Like we fucking put balloons onto or put balloons like literally everywhere as well. Like it's it's just crazy, man.
专业。
And like why the fuck would like China just use a bunch of fucking balloons that like have either have limited or no maneuverability? Like that just doesn't make any sense to me.
Molinaro is a professor of legal studies at Ontario Tech University. He previously worked as a national security analyst with the federal government. Professor Molinaro is in Oshawa, Ontario. So, Professor, let's start on the latest out of the White House, that it's possible that the three objects shot down over the weekend were benign, not a threat at all. What do you make of that?
Not surprising. Chances, because like I said before, they're most likely more fucking balloons, and the chances are is that they're fucking private balloons as well, owned by like companies.
I think that's actually what all we're going to probably get, unless there's actual wreckage that is found. For the time being, that's really as much as they could probably say about these objects, because it's really the wreckage that's going to determine really where the objects were likely from and give us an indication of what they were doing here, essentially.
So how likely is it you think we'll actually get that wreckage? Because the Lake Huron stuff seems pretty hard to recover, and even the stuff in Yukon is pretty remote and in tough terrain.
Yeah, I mean...
And like one thing I love about this is that like Justin Trudeau ordered NORAD to, shoot down the balloon, and like American jets shot it down, right? And the funny thing is that conservatives are trying to spin this as like, oh well, the Americans shot it down for us. Justin Trudeau's so fucking weak, despite the fact that he literally gave the order to NORAD. Like, what?
In terms of recovery, it's not looking hopeful. One, you have, like you mentioned, Lake Huron, the depths of the water, it's particularly deep. We're also talking about the Arctic, a vast, remoteness in terms of the region, lots of square kilometers in terms of land cover in the Yukon, Arctic Ocean. I mean, this is not going to be easy. It's going to be extremely challenging, especially given the size of the objects that were reported. They weren't very large, so it's going to be incredibly challenging.
Right.
Not to mention like the lack of infrastructure that exists within northern Canada. Like, there's like next to none.
The first one that the U.S. says is a Chinese spy balloon. The Chinese say is a weather balloon. That was big, right? Multiple vehicles in size. So these smaller ones, I mean, is it possible these were just devices tied to commercial or academic research? I mean, what could they possibly
100%.
be if they're benign?
They could be tied to any of those things that you mentioned. However, the issue is that likely we would have known by now. I'm sure if it was a civilian craft, that somebody would have come forward and claimed ownership of this and essentially
Not necessarily.
the kind of interest and scare that was going on essentially in the national security community about these things. Somebody would have come forward and claimed them. So that hasn't happened. And given the size of them, even though we're talking about something that's the size of a car or 2 school buses, however the measurements they were using, that's still pretty large for something to be flying at that kind of altitude. So we're still talking about the likelihood that it could have still potentially been something that was military in origin, but we're not going to be able to officially say that until you actually get the wreckage.
Okay, so could something actually be a foreign state actor and benign at the same time?
Well, it could be something that was more akin to something like a drone. It could be a type of balloon. I mean, for me, for them to scramble fighter jets to actually go up and take this down, it says to me that there must have been some indication of some similarity to the balloon in some fashion.
Yeah, the similarity is it's another fucking balloon. It is what it is.
Whether it was visual or perhaps some type of signature that was very similar, we don't know, obviously, but there was a reason for that. And so there was something that really kind of was pressing that the need to take it down, in addition to it being in civilian airspace.
Yeah, certainly there was a lot of political reaction and pressure to respond, and people were kind of freaking out about it to the point that the Pentagon had to assure us it wasn't aliens. I don't know if that factored into the shoot down decision.
Conspiracy theorists, like, even like fucking idiots that I know, have been like, no, it's fucking aliens, and they're trying to cover it up. I'm like, no, chances are it's more fucking balloons, or it's a fucking secret thing that that a military is developing, because that's what they always do when they say it's fucking aliens. It's usually like military like testing, and like, if you can test it on your fucking military and it's successful during their training and shit, chances are you're gonna fucking use it, right? Because like, it wouldn't make too much sense not to.
But the U.S. as part of the reason that NORAD is suddenly seeing a lot of these objects is because it's recalibrated the way its radar works, right? It normally looks for larger, faster moving objects. Now,
yeah, that, which is also true. Like, they've mostly been paying attention to more faster moving objects, and like things that haven't or things that don't typically move, that are move like, I don't know, like 10 kilometers per hour.
For smaller, slower moving, and picking up a lot of these. So does this suggest to you that there was an awareness gap sort of in our continental security setup?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it absolutely does. And that's really the part to take away here. I think ultimately the message to take away from this. Like, we don't want to get to a situation where, we're overreacting or we're panicking to the situation. At the same time, we have to go with what we do know, and we know about the Chinese balloon. So we know enough to say that at least the United States and Canada feels comfortable enough to say that this device was used for intelligence collection. Intelligence collection of various kinds: images, signals, communications intelligence. And the fact that it entered airspace undetected, or at least have in the past, there's reports that it happened in the United States in the past and also other countries, and was lost and then picked up again, suggests that now we have a new concern, and it's the repurposing of older technologies to get around more modern ones. And that can be a problem, particularly when it comes to intelligence collection, but also if states are looking at getting more intelligence collection to think about in terms of war, for instance, testing someone's air defenses. How could they possibly get something in there without being detected?
Which, like, I could, like, technically, or I could, like, see that's what, like, China was doing with like their with their balloon, right? It's more or less just seeing what they're capable of, and then, like, what the reactions were gonna be and everything. And the funny thing is that, like, if China really wanted to just, watch the West die, like, and like just fall entirely, all that they have to do really is just, like, kick up their feet and just watch. Because, like, in America alone, like, I don't know, like 5 people a day died to, like, just police brutality alone. That's not even getting into, like, the pretty much daily mass shootings that happen as well. So there's that, right?
So really, I think it calls for more modernization, actually, of NORAD in terms of its capabilities. Even though it responded quite well, I think there's room for more improvement.
So I just want to circle back to China, which there's no dispute the first object was Chinese. The dispute is over its intention and what it was. But when given the opportunity to deny that these 3 mystery objects were Chinese, a spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry simply said, "I don't have anything on that." What should we read into that?
We should read that China would, like, if it was crafts that were connected to China of Chinese origin, it's more than likely they will not admit to it unless they are compelled to, because then admitting to that will probably sink diplomatic relations even lower than they already are over.
I mean, diplomatic relations between the West and China are already fairly low, so, like, what's the worst that they could do, right? And like, when it comes down to that, like, didn't China, like, admit that the balloon, like, the initial balloon was theirs to begin with? Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I honestly feel like they're just trying to frame it like, China bad, big scary China and shit like that. Because chances are these were just private balloons. They very well could have been Chinese, but I think that that's a very slim possibility.
One object penetrating North American airspace for intelligence collection. Multiple objects. Now we're into much more serious implications. And the idea always is, when it comes to intelligence collection of another state, intentions are notoriously difficult to hammer down. But it's likely that the United States is also, and Canada is also, relying not just on the actual takedown of the craft, because that's one thing. But there's likely other avenues of intelligence collection going on: signals intelligence, human source intelligence, that are filling in the picture of what the PRC is potentially doing with this balloon.
Right. I just wonder, though, you hear about spy satellites, right? I mean, what's the value of a dirigible or a balloon or something like this when you have satellite technology and the other methods that you mentioned?
Sure. Well, satellites are stuck in orbit, right? They move. So it's not as if it's it's going to be able to capture detailed images at a time. And everybody knows what the orbits are. The United States is fully aware of where PRC satellites are and what they're likely going to be hovering over at a particular point in time. A balloon, though, is different. I mean, you're talking about a craft that could, one, get into radar, past radar, but also hover for a much longer period of time, and also get much more detailed pictures. And again, it's not just about pictures. We're also talking about things like communications intelligence, right? We're talking about the fact that a balloon can be outfitted, as we've already heard from the United States, with communications technology to pick up signals that are emitting from certain areas. And if they're monitoring sensitive sites like they were apparently in Montana, that can provide them with some more information, particularly if something comes to a conflict. What's the United States capability in terms of how quickly can they mobilize air defenses? What kind of vulnerabilities could they detect in terms of could they equip these balloons with a payload that could deliver a strike to take out the United States' ability?
I mean, like, didn't Japan do that in World War II, though? With, like, dropping, like bombs or, like, balls of fire. And like, the thing is, like, I honestly don't really think that would happen, to be honest. Like, and like, chances are, like, if it was to happen, that, I'm sure we would know about it in advance and just take care of it, right?
To counter them in a nuclear conflict. I mean, lots of things can be done with this.
Okay, Dennis Molinaro, it's a good point to end it on. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
For 2 weeks now, North America has been consumed by a mystery. One that had the world's biggest military superpower scrambling fighter jets to shoot down what could potentially be a serious threat to national and international security.
We got it! Eyes were glued to the sky as an American F-22 Raptor shot down a Chinese spy balloon Saturday.
Order the Pentagon to shoot it down on Wednesday as soon as possible.
Work is now underway to recover the debris off the Carolina coast.
It was surprising, unprecedented, and
Bro,
in a way,
what is this
so
audio?
audacious and brazen as to seem absurd.
The balloon found its way into everything.
Taking a shot.
From Top Gun to Snoopy versus the Red Baron. Jimmy Fallon.
Like, okay, like, I've seen, like, memes about, like, the Chinese balloon on TikTok. I love the memes that have come out of it. It's so funny.
Let John Dutton from Yellowstone.
There you go. A Chinese spy balloon over Montana. Oh my God. Now they know where we keep the cows.
Ugh. Libs.
But of course, we now know it didn't stop at the spy balloon. Since then, there have been more of these flying objects of concern.
It's UFOs, brother.
One, right? The Chinese spy balloon that started all of this. It was shot down
They're
almost 20
UFOs.
kilometers off the coast of South Carolina after crossing Canada, hovering over the United States for 5 straight days. Then a week later, a U.S. fighter jet brought down an unidentified object over Alaska.
It's aliens.
And this wasn't a small thing. A White House official said it was the size of a car and most likely not a balloon. The very next day, an American F-22 fighter jet with NORAD shot down a high-altitude airborne object, this time in Canada, over Yukon. The description we got was cylindrical and smaller than the first object, the spy balloon. Then, unbelievably, another object was spotted over Montana and finally shot down by an American F-16 jet over Lake Huron. Officials say this particular object had an octagonal structure with strings hanging off. Now, all 3 of the unidentified flying objects shot down since Friday have similarities. They all seemed to float.
They're all balloons.
Obvious propulsion system.
They're all balloons.
They were unmanned, and they were flying at altitudes where planes fly, which is obviously dangerous. But there's a lot we don't know. Like, what were these objects doing exactly? Like, what was their purpose? And how did they get
They're
up?
spying on us, brother. I swear. Them Chinese are spying on us. despite them, having other ways of doing so. They're corrupting the generation. They're making everyone gay communists.
Up there, right? Who launched
And I want to reassure Americans that these objects do not present a military threat to anyone on the ground. They do, however, present a risk to civil aviation and potentially an intelligence collection threat. Our priority is debris recovery so that we can get a better sense of what these objects are.
Obviously, there is some sort of pattern in there. The fact that we are seeing this in a significant degree over the past week is a cause for interest and close attention, which is exactly what we're doing.
Officials say they are finding more objects, partly because they're taking a closer look.
Better scrutiny of our airspace, also the adjusting of the radar sensitivities.
I think what it is just an overreaction of the first balloon that they found. So they're literally just shooting anything out of the sky that isn't planes and flies. I think that's what it mostly is. If it's a drone or if it's a balloon or whatever the fuck, chances are it's going to be shot down, right?
Which means we're seeing more things than we would normally see.
Could be a drone, could be a balloon, could be any number of objects. We simply do not know, and the forensics will reveal all of it.
It would appear, though, that just from its size, that it didn't represent the technology that apparently was represented on the Chinese balloon.
So, what is going on here? According to the White House, the leading explanation is that these are just commercial craft, maybe just research balloons.
And chances are they probably are.
So quickly against so many things. Shoot first, ask questions later.
Because we're afraid of literally everything. That's just how the West is. Anything that affects Western hegemonic powers is automatically terrifying. We just can't, we're just incredibly fucking terrified.
Well, I spoke with Andrea Charon, director of the Center for Defense and Security Studies at the University of Manitoba, to help us break it all down. Hi, Andrea. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you.
So it does really seem like something has changed, right? Because we went from, one spy balloon, which itself already seemed, correct me if I'm wrong, very surprising, very unusual, to all of a sudden 3 more unidentified objects. What explains this?
Well, there are a couple of possibilities. One is that they're completely unrelated, the spy balloon from these new objects, and it's just coincidence. It's likely, too, that
chances are it probably is
looking for lower and slower air objects as a result of past experience, and so we're detecting them. And I think it is also a function of pictures that were circulated about the Chinese spy balloon and the quite dramatic takedown of it obviously then piqued the world to additional objects in the sky.
Andrea, I hate to ask you to guess, but I'm going to ask you to guess. What's the range of what these unidentified objects could possibly and plausibly have been?
So the 3 air objects could range the gamut from bona fide research tools, in which case somebody's having a very bad day, has created an international incident and lost their research.
Right.
That would suck.
They could also be testing platforms for the future that could perhaps support surveillance material to be able to take pictures of highly classified areas or pick up signals intelligence. They could also become platforms to maybe carry some kind of weapons system, although these seem to be really quite small and seem not to be able to maneuver on their own. So
and didn't the balloons that Japan used in World War II insanely big? Right?
that seems less.
Or am I just crazy?
but it does show that Canadians, I think, have been under the assumption that we in North America are that fireproof house, that we are safe and secure. And both Canada and the United States have tended to default to sending their militaries away from North America to address threats as far away as possible from North America.
Yeah, we're spreading democracy, brother. I don't know what you're talking about. You see, the Middle East needs democracy. None of this libtard nonsense. They need democracy because they have oil.
But in doing so, we've left ourselves vulnerable.
Let me ask you this: does any of what's happened and the way it's happened worry you in the sense that, I mean, shooting something down when you don't know what it is, you don't know what's going to happen, if it's necessarily going to damage property or hurt people when it crashes down, like, this all seems kind of dangerous, no?
You think they give a shit if they hit, like, the 2 people that live in Alaska, or not Alaska, in Yukon? Like, bro, there's like 5 people that live in the Yukon, and if they hit and kill like 2 of them, that's like half of their population gone.
Practice this, and I think that's why you saw the President Biden wait to give the shoot down order for the surveillance balloon until it was in the Atlantic, where they could retrieve the debris and it would limit any sort of damage. Likewise, with the 3 air objects, it was determined that they didn't pose a military threat, but they were flying at an altitude that could conflict with civilian aviation. And so it becomes a safety concern. And, you know, it's not something, we don't have some great big arm we can reach out and grab these things. So shooting them down seemed the best thing to do. And so where they were shot down in Alaska, in the Yukon. And
I also think it's a little bit extreme to do so, right? Until, like, you have concrete evidence on what it is, right?
Lake Huron, again, I think, was to time it to limit any collateral damage, hopefully be able to retrieve as much of the debris as possible so that they could start the investigation of determining who owns these objects and what were their intent.
Well, and on that note, Andrea, I wonder how this cycle stops, right? Like, if we keep shooting things down because
it doesn't.
This heightened state of awareness.
It doesn't, because North America is the dumbest continent on the planet. We see something in the sky, we go, oh, scary, it go kaboom. Like, that's what we're going to be doing.
Awareness and anxiety, but shooting them down without knowing what they are, and we still don't know what they are. Why wouldn't we just keep doing this tomorrow and next week and the month after? Like what stops the cycle?
That's the professionalism around NORAD and the analysts. They do an assessment and provide a lot of options. And so it's quite exceptional that we've ever had to shoot things down. And so each object is sort of taken on its own merits, and you look at the threat it poses to North America, to people, and to infrastructure. And so I don't think it's a guarantee that there's going to be a shoot down code every time. It really depends on the circumstances. It could be in the future that, we just watch objects until they are out of national airspace, and then we can employ police, and perhaps there's a criminal investigation. Perhaps in the future they will have to be shot down, but each case is taken on its own merits.
Andrea Charon, thanks for this.
My pleasure, thank you.
Trump. What's up? How's it going?
They just shot it.
What is going on up there? First, an alleged Chinese spy balloon, and now more objects have been brought down over North America, with Canada right in the middle of it. The Chinese balloon suggests there's a new era in surveillance to gather data that satellites.
Am I communist? Yes.
satellites high above cannot.
Obviously, the closer you are to something, the more detail you can see. So a balloon would have that as an advantage. It has a certain amount of what we
type. I would say mostly like Marxist-Leninist. I have some anarcho-communist views.
call persistence to stay over a particular region of the ground below you.
You can garner information on radio waves, on cyber activities and things like this that not necessarily a satellite would be able to.
What? No, I don't want dictatorships at all. Obviously you haven't read like any of Lenin's work.
To be able to sense.
Many of the satellites we know for weather and communications are way out, about 35,000 kilometers and in sync with the Earth's orbit. Most satellites, however, are in low Earth orbit. Up to 2,000 kilometers above the Earth, there are some 2,800 satellites.
Like what? Overthrowing, an oppressive regime that had been plaguing Russia for a very long time and has like created like inevitable like inequality within that. What? Like what? Like which ones? Okay, but Poland also got like a lot of help from from the USSR. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I don't necessarily think the USSR was perfect at like any form. Like, there definitely was flaws.
Satellites, including spy satellites. By comparison, the International Space Station orbits around 350 kilometers above Earth. Now, outer space begins around 100 kilometers.
20s definitely not. In 1930s with Stalin, they split. Oh, fuck. I mean, yeah, but like most of that has to like. That's most of that's just Stalin's doing though. And like I'm not too big of a fan of Stalin anyways.
Up. Commercial aircraft fly around 10 to 12 kilometers high. Weather balloons are often in the stratosphere. That Chinese balloon was determined to be about 60 kilometers high. The other objects brought down over the weekend were 20 and 40 kilometers high. It's in this space between where commercial aircraft...
Bro, we are paranoid about literally fucking everything. North America is so stupid, man. I mean, in the 20s, it was Lenin attacking. We won, but they took over all of Ukraine, which wanted independence. I mean, like, that could literally be said about, like, any other country. Like, every country involves itself in imperialism. And, like, if I'm not mistaken, I think a lot of the countries that were a part of the USSR saw, like, a lot of, like, benefits to joining rather than, like, than not, right?
Craft are flying, and where outer space begins, that objects have not been watched as closely, and that is changing.
One of the reasons that we think we're seeing more is because we're looking for more.
The White House concedes that the U.S., Canada, and NORAD have only recently begun to tweak their radar systems to watch that airspace for objects slower than planes and missiles.
Now we have countries that are pretty chill. SOCDEMs in the EU are pretty normal. I mean, well, yeah, first of all, that should be like the baseline. And a lot of those SOCDEM countries in the EU also became more socially democratic because of how their proximity to the USSR. Like, the thing is like, if the USSR wasn't a thing, like, things could, like, inevitably been, like, a lot more worse in the EU than what it currently is. Like, things could have easily turned out like as America, right?
They have modified the filters and the gains, as we call it, of the radar capabilities to look more discreetly.
I mean, a lot of that could also be said about South American countries too, though. But I do think that the proximity to the Soviet Union did definitely play a role in that. Like, sure, there were socialists within the EU. They're everywhere, right? I think it's more predominant now, more than like any point in history, because of the failings of capitalism, for sure.
At high altitude, small radar cross section, and low speed objects.
It'll be important to find the objects to know whether they're all designed in some way to test North American defenses.
These are going to be very key operations, not only in getting answers for
Socialists in the past had good points about worker abuse, but the USSR was mostly a cancer that created dictatorships around the world. Not entirely. I would disagree with like countries like Cuba, for example. And like, it seems like Cuba has been or at least those that live in Cuba have been fairly satisfied with it. I mean, the Korean War is like a gigantic, complicated mess of geopolitics. Like, it's more than just like it's more than just like what people see on the surface level. There's a whole bunch of shit that goes into it, right? And like, yeah, no shit, North Korea is ass. Like, yeah, no one disagrees on that. But like any other like former like Soviet nation or other nation that the Soviets had helped out, like, they turned out completely differently. Like, you have China, you have Cuba, you have those that were in proximity to the USSR in, like, say, Sweden, Norway, you know. I thought the reform started underneath Mao, which also received a lot of support from the Soviets as well. I mean, didn't he literally start like with the public ownership of private property, though?
Canadians being able to prepare to counter future threats.
There are few answers, but many new questions about how intelligence is being gathered over Canada and the US and how to prevent it without shooting down more and more unidentified aerial phenomena. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
I mean, we just need to like actually think about it clearly, but we're too stupid to do so. Okay. Reform carried out by Deng and his allies gradually led to China, with China from a planned economy and Maoist ideologies. It opened it up to foreign investments in technology and introduced its vast labor force to the global market, thus turning China into one of the world's fastest growing economies. I mean, yeah, but like, there were still like like if I'm not mistaken, I think like in China they're still taught like I don't necessarily disagree. I do agree with certain things that they do, like no government is perfect. But if I'm not mistaken, I think that they're still taught Mao in China, if I'm not mistaken. But like as for like things that like China does that I agree with, I think forcible donations by billionaires are incredibly good. I mean, from what I understand, the PRC, for the most part, people are fairly supportive of their government. And like I did like a little bit of research into like how they actually like do stuff in there, and like when it comes to like picking a leader. And if I'm not mistaken, I think they do it through like some different parties and like whatever, and then like, you know, the representative, like they choose their representative, and then their representative chooses someone from their party, and so on and so forth, if I remember correctly. Initial dictatorships in Russia pulls claim 80% plus support Putin. It's unknown how many pulls more than 40%. Yeah, but you're talking about Putin though, and Russia's like a hyper-capitalist economy too, though. And like, I'm not surprised that the polls are like that in in Russia to begin with. Like, ever since the collapse of the USSR, Russia has been incredibly corrupt. Russia is a gang state? Yeah, I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more. Like, anyways. The U.S. military fighter jets on Sunday shot down an octagonal object over Lake Huron. The Pentagon said the last incident since a suspected Chinese surveillance balloon put North America's security forces on high alert. It was corrupt too. I mean, for sure, I don't deny that there wasn't any corruption in the USSR. There definitely was. But I think like as like the experiment that the USSR was, it was fairly successful and a step in the right direction. Granted, yes, there definitely was things that they did wrong. Absolutely. um yeah, like I'm not too like I know like I know the geopolitics of like ex-Soviet states are like incredibly like complex and everything, and like I'm not really too like sure on like what Poland did and everything during those times and everything like that for sure, but yeah, I can't really give an opinion without like too much, or with not enough information on my part on that subject at least. um it was the fourth flying object to be shot down over North America by a U.S. missile in a little more than a week. China's foreign ministry said it had no information on the last three flying objects shot down by the U.S. So many ads. Poland was a little bit more open than other Soviet puppets. Case were not prosecuted, and capitalism, even if in small form, was allowed. Yeah. I mean, like, comparatively to, like, a lot of, like, other states, I still think that the Soviets were a lot more progressive than a lot of, like, post-Soviet, era, countries that, were, like, helped out by the US. And, like, even the US alone as well. We're calling them objects, not balloons, for a reason. Van Herk, head of North American Aerospace Defense Command, and Northern Command said, Van Herk said he would not rule it out as aliens or any other explanation. Bro, what? Who is, like, outside of, like, idiots, who thinks that this is aliens, right? Like, I've only heard, like, conspiracy theorists call it aliens, and, like, the government's trying to hide it. US definitely should change certain policies, especially when it comes to stuff like healthcare, but I think the only revolution that will happen in the future is the AI one. I don't necessarily disagree, but with the state of capitalism right now, and especially with how far or how much more left the like millennials and Gen Z have been, I do think that there's going to be, like, a push for a lot more, like, say, a lot more like progressive policies. I think AI will kill off capitalism because eventually it likes progress. Not necessarily. Capital owners will still find a way to use AI to, like, reduce costs and, you know, lay off a bunch more of the working class. Because, like, it's the same thing, like, with automation, right? Because with automation, you have like robots performing like repeatable tasks and everything, stuff like that, right? In the short, that's in the short term. The long term will decrease in population. I think eventually it will happen. I mean, yeah, for sure, but, like, the capitalist class definitely has used automation to its benefit, for sure. Like, there have been layoffs with automation, as well as the average worker is more productive than ever, sure, but at the same time they're getting paid a lot less in comparison. And when it comes to the long term, I think that there's a multitude of different reasons on why the capitalist system will fall. And, like, the declining birth rates argument, like, it's mostly due to the fact of a lot more countries are becoming more modernized, and generally when a country becomes more modernized, they tend to have fewer births overall. That's why I want the population to decrease. Like, it will do if unchanged, and I don't agree with liberals about increasing immigration. I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with that for sure. As we've seen, like with modernization, people are having a lot less kids because their kids are surviving, childhood and shit, and we don't have to worry about, them getting like whooping cough and dying. But there are also other factors that go into that, like say microplastics blocking hormones, or a lot of the processed foods that we eat for sure around the world. I think we should try to elevate the standard of living. I personally don't want it, to be honest. I mean, yeah, I agree. We should 100% increase the standard of living for sure. Increasing the standard of living really only hurts like the top 1%. And who's not to say like the next Albert Einstein is born in like I don't know, like the Congo. But unfortunately, there's like a lot of profit to be made within like say like the military industrial complex, going to war, other forms of imperialism. There's definitely like a reason on why that isn't happening. And like whenever they these more poorer countries try to start like a revolution or like try to unionize or something, Western countries and companies tend to swing their big dick and be like, no, we're not going to allow that. We're going to kill you. And it's fucking disgusting. Leadership. It was more like, let them be. No. Not now. The second would be corps not following the governments. I mean, to be fair though, a lot of the big corporations do follow or do like play by like their own rules and shit. And a lot of especially like neoliberal governments tend to let them just get away with it and not hold them to any repercussions. Sometimes they do. If it's like a really egregious atrocity, they do. But with the like derailment in East Palestine that happened in Ohio like a couple days ago, like I guess it would be like a week or so at this point. Like they're 100% going to get away with it. They have sanctioned them quite a lot. Facebook even started to cry that they will leave. They didn't because the market is too big. I mean, that's what corporations do though, is that whenever something that they don't like, is like challenged or whatever, or passed, they're just gonna fucking cry about it. It's the exact same thing as like as right wingers, right? Like whenever like legislation's passed that like that right wingers don't like, whether it's say like I don't know, like trans reaffirming care or whatever, like they're gonna cry about it either way, right? And like it also doesn't really help that like a lot of Western neoliberal countries also do treat corporations like people as well, so that also doesn't help. All right, let's get back to this this weirdo who's claiming that these probably be like aliens or some shit. I'll let the intel community and the counterintelligence community figure that out, he said. Another defense official is speaking on conditions of animosity. Still definitely excited about the future of AI, especially in gaming. Oh yeah, no, like for sure. The future of AI definitely is exciting for sure. I do think that it should be regulated though, because I'll give an example. I'm friends with people who are animators or artists or whatever, and they are not really too happy with AI generated art, especially because, like, you know, it hurts their well-being, first of all, right? As well as, like, a lot of the AI generated art also tends to use a lot of artwork that is not given permission, and it just tends to be like worse overall. And then, like, you also have like the like people complaining about, like, oh, chat GPT is going to destroy education as we know it, despite the fact that the education system has been broken for like an incredibly long time, right? Eventually it will break everything. I mean, it could. It depends on like what laws and regulations we put in place for it, for sure. And like it also goes against like like if I'm not mistaken, I think it goes against one of the 3 rules of robotics. I don't remember them off the top of my head, but President Joe Biden's order, the U.S. F-16 fighter shot down the object at 2:42 p.m. local time over Lake Huron on the U.S.-Canada border. Pentagon spokesperson Brigadier General Patrick Ryder said in an official statement. Though it did not pose a military threat, the object could have potentially interfered with domestic air traffic as it was traveling at 20,000 feet and it might have had surveillance capabilities, Ryder said. Thing I was thinking this week was, let's say we have a full simulation where you could do anything you want. Would it be moral to literally let people to anything in such a simulation? No, I don't think so. Because while there is like no correlation between, like, say, violent video games and like any form of violence, like there I do think that, like, there should be like some form of like regulation over it, for sure. I think it should be left to the communities to decide that, for sure. But if things get out of hand, then I'm not really too sure. And like I don't know, it's a complicated subject I don't really want to think too much about right now. The object appeared to be an octagonal structure in structure with strings hanging off, but no discernible payload, said the U.S. officials speaking on conditions of anonymity. Is that it would also be private, so be weird to check what people do there, being looking like at someone's porn history. I mean, I don't really care if people know my fucking porn history, though. That's probably a little bit cap, though. But like, I don't want to get banned. But like, there always has been like some form of interference in privacy for sure. The main question is how far should we go with it, though? Like, I do think that when it comes down to it, I think that people should have like their freedom of privacy for sure. But when it comes, I think when it comes down, like, for me personally, when it comes down to, say, like someone that does pose like a threat to, say, like, I don't know, like inciting a fascist insurrection or something like that, I do think that there should be like some surveillance there for sure. Because, you know, yeah, sure, when it comes to like things like, say, counter protests and everything, yeah, you know, they do work for sure. Because, you know, Nazis are a bunch of fucking cowards. And get, you know, the shit beaten out of them by like the one anarchist that's there, which is really funny. Yeah. When it and Arrow. I mean, a lot of like the dictators that people tend to talk about tend to be like more like tend to be like incredibly left wing, and has been fueled by a lot of like agitprop and stuff like that. Because like we saw it with we saw it in Iran, we saw it in Chile, we saw it with when Lula first came into power. Like there's like it also depends on like what someone's I guess what someone's definition of it is as well. Like you have people like myself saying, Kim Jong-un is a dictator, which is true, and then you also have idiots saying like, I don't know, Joe Biden or Justin Trudeau is a dictator. There were far right, there were left, right, and center dictators around the world. Oh, for sure. I do think that that overall, like the left ones would fare a little bit better for sure, but like I do think that people should have like some form of like independence over themselves for sure. But the irony in that, though, is that like a lot of those like left-wing dictators also implemented like a lot of incredible programs to their country, like say reading programs or healthcare, education, medicine. Like there have been things that they have done good for sure, but there's also been a lot of bad, right? And like and like when it comes down to like countries that are under a dictatorship that people think are like communist or whatever, like North Korea, like no, they're not left wing. Good stuff everyone did. I live in Italy and my city was created by fascists, for example. Like what would be like something good that they did? Like I know that I know that like in Venice, for example, they have some form of universal housing. Um, Better worker rights and created cities in place. It was a swamp before. But like, weren't those worker rights only expanded to like white workers though, or and like as and like not North Italians as well? And like swampland is actually a fairly important part of the ecosystem as well. That kind of surprises me a little bit. And I'm not really too sure how. I mean, to be fair though, like the British Empire was like insane though. And like the British are still fucking racist. I don't know what you're like they just the British are something else. I'll say that much. They abolished slavery in Ethiopia, even made the invasion. It was fucked up. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just that just tends to be how it is, though. Like, yeah, a lot of like countries in the global north do tend to still use a lot of slavery still, though. So like, whether it be like in the form of like, say, the criminal justice system, or like like a lot of the companies like hiring like third parties to do like the child labor shit. It's really fucking gross. um the object was was believed to be as the same one as recently shot over Montana near sensitive military sites, prompting the closure of the U.S. airspace, the Pentagon said. The military will try to recover the object down over Lake Huron. To learn more about it, Van Herk told reporters. He said it likely fell into Canadian waters. The incident raised questions about the spread of unusual objects that have appeared over North American skies in the recent weeks, and raising tensions with China. we need the facts about where they are originating from, what their purpose is, and why they're frequently is increasing. The U.S. Representative Debbie Dingell, one of several Michigan lawmakers who applauded the military for downing the object. I think the fascist goal in Africa was to eventually culturally convert people to become Italians. I don't think so. I'm sure that they had other nefarious reasons. Like, honestly, I could have seen them easily making them slaves, because fascism always relies on an out group, and usually that out group tends to be, like, you know, like, say, LGBTQ, skin color. Like, you still have fascists believing in that shit today. And, like, their messaging hasn't changed either. Slaves, I highly doubt. They were against slavery because of the church and the church's influence. Does more of the Nazis. I mean, it doesn't really matter though, right? Because, like, I mean, yeah, sure, like, Nazis took, like, inspiration from, like, American fucking brutality. But, like, the fascists in Italy were not too fucking great either. And, like, just because, like, you throw, like, a little bit of flavoring on it from, like, Italian, like, flavoring on it doesn't necessarily mean it was. Well, yeah, of course. But a lot of them also tended to side with, or a lot of the businesses also tended to side with the fascists as well, though. And, like, why I say that in this instance they could have turned them into slaves is because, you know, corporations love free labor, right? U.S. officials identified the first object as a Chinese surveillance balloon and shot it down off the coast of southern Carolina on February 4th. On Friday, the second object was shot down over the Sea of Ice near Dead Horse, Alaska, and the third object was destroyed over Canada's Yukon on Saturday. The investigators are still hunting for the wreckage. It's going to be really fun for them to find the Yukon one. The security of citizens is our top priority, and that's why I've made the decision to have the unidentified object shot down, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau told reporters on Sunday. Economically, ideologically, was workers and corporations come second. They should work for what the state wants. Under that aspect, it is really similar to China today. I'm meant to read the corporatism gives perspectives on the similarities between the two regimes. I mean, I do think that, like, especially when it comes like the Uyghurs in China, and like the and not giving like Hong Kong its independence has been like infuriatingly bad, right? I mean, yeah, for sure. It's egregious on like what they've been doing for sure, but like realistically, I have like no room to talk because like my country tried to commit genocide against my entire my entire people, like whether it be like just regular genocide or like cultural genocide or whatever. Like it was fucking disgusting, and like only now they're starting to recognize that, oh hey, maybe the residential schools were bad, and like paying lip service to it at best. US does shitty things, but calling out other shitty stuff should still be done. Oh, absolutely, for sure. Like, I don't disagree. Like, I do have like a lot of criticisms against like even the USSR, for sure. Like they've done a bunch of fucking horrible shit, especially done today. Yeah, for sure. And like I think the rise of global fascism doesn't really help with that either, because you know it's just easier to be like fuck everything than like actually trying to get along with people with like a different view on the world and like ideology and like location and shit. North America has been on guard against aerial institutions following the appearance of the white, eye-catching Chinese airship over American skies earlier this month. A 200-foot tall balloon, which Americans have accused Beijing of using to spy on the U.S., caused an international incident, leading Secretary of State Anthony Blinken to call off a planned trip to China only hours before he was set to depart. Pentagon officials said they had been scrutinizing radar more closely than usual. Surveillance fears appear to have U.S. officials on high alert. Twice in 24 hours, U.S. officials closed airspace only to reopen it swiftly. Especially like you said, in the U.S., they tried to kill... No, I live in Canada. Here during World War II, Nazis tried to do the same to my people, seeing genocide. Oh yeah, no, we 100% did. In fact, if anything, it was more brutal than what the Americans did. Like, we're still uncovering unmarked graves. And, like, the thing is like, yeah, sure, like, when the first, like, 200 were found, like, it was big news. But, like, then it just kept getting higher and higher and higher, and then you had, like, fucking right-wing reactionaries being like, oh, no, they're just fucking making up shit. And, it's not the fucking case. And, like, the news cycle just completely dropped it overall. Which outside of, like, indigenous communities and, like, leftists, I've heard, like, nothing, like, about it at all. Like, not even from the Prime Minister, who apparently claims to care about, like reparations and shit, which, yeah, I'll believe that when I see it. But yeah, like, I know World War II Germany has been pretty fucking bad. That's why seeing what the Russians are doing to Ukrainian children or Chinese to Uyghur children pisses me off too. It's like seeing the same stuff that was happening in the past today too. 100%. It's very infuriating. Like the best thing that I can see, like I speculated this like when Russia like initially like invaded Ukraine, that it was mostly for like imperialist endeavors and just trying to get access to like the resources and the land and shit. Like they can throw whatever fucking spice they want on it, but like it was like it still very well could be like I know tensions, or I know like the geopolitics of the Soviet, like ex-Soviet states is like incredibly tense, and like there was some already like a lot of tense shit going on between Russia and Ukraine, and like the potential of Ukraine joining NATO. I've talked with some Russian imperialists. They don't consider Ukraine people as real. Sure, the Ukraine culture might be younger, but it exists, so why does it matter that it's younger? And they actually fail to answer. Oh yeah, no, for sure. Like current day Russia, I think, is like a fascist hellhole. And like they love pointing to like the Azov battalion, I think it was, right? In Ukraine being like, "Oh, we got to stop the fascists," despite the fact that like Russia, like current day Russia has like way more fascists than like the small amounts that was in like Ukraine. And like when you pressure someone like who like doesn't really understand the entire like concept that they're like talking about, it's like, oh yeah, no, we can't really do anything, which is why fascist ideology tends to fall apart fairly easily. The Russians used Nazi platoons in Ukraine since 2014. It's so ironic them saying it. Oh, for sure. And like I was wrong on the initial invasion of Ukraine, because I thought that it wasn't going to happen, right? Because they've done similar things to that before, like for like what 10 years or so, and nothing really came out of it. I think what it was the pressure of NATO like approaching on its doorstep. Yeah, it was incredibly shocking. Like it's one thing that I have been wrong on, because like I think like a vast majority of like leftists in general were wrong on that, because like they've done similar stuff to that before. Like just like we knew for a fact that Vladimir Putin was like a fucking weirdo psychopath, and then he wouldn't do it, but he did. Proved us wrong. I think they were planning already for 2020 since COVID stopped it. It could have been, yeah, but I don't really think so. I'm sure. I think what it was Ukraine potentially joining NATO. I think that's what it was. Because, like, seeing how the Belarusian dictatorship almost killed the Belarusian language sucks too. It went from 80% of people speaking to 20%. What do they primarily speak in Belarus now then? Because I have NA brain, I don't really know too much that goes on in UK Russian. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I want to make them Russians and unite them to Russia. Oh yeah, that's right. I remember that. I remember now. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's wild.
Now, high on the
Anyways, should Canada when Jesus, this scared the crap out of me. I don't usually hear that sound, so it scares the shit out of me. So yeah, let's move on to should Canada lead security mission to Haiti.
The agenda for the Caribbean leaders is, of course, the crisis in Haiti. Yesterday, U.S. federal agents arrested 4 suspects in Florida on charges they were involved in the plot to assassinate Haitian President Jovenel Moïse in 2021. Haiti has been in political turmoil since the assassination. The unelected Prime Minister, Ariel Henry, called for an international military intervention.
All right, well, thanks for stopping by. Hope you had a good time hanging out here. This probably won't be the usual time. My schedule got changed a little bit, so yeah, stop by anytime. I do more than just cover news and politics too. I actually do gaming sometimes too, so. Damn. Did you not go to bed? Oh, that's fair. At least you're not being woken up by a friend of yours like 2 to 3 times in a day. It was really annoying. I still got a bugger about that. Anyways, take care of yourself. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Force to help stem gang violence in early January in order to hold elections. While Canada has committed a military patrol aircraft to provide surveillance information to Haitian police, it has not committed to lead an intervention force.
To join the military police and have the test in 1 month, so I gotta train. Yeah, that's fair. Won't catch me joining any military though.
For more
All
on
right.
the situation in Haiti,
See you later.
the that led the country to this point, I'm joined by former Governor General Michaël Jean, who was born in Haiti. Michaël Jean, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'd like to start, if I could, with the overall security situation in Haiti. And there have been calls by some for a foreign intervention force in that country and for Canada to maybe lead it.
Not really military. Except police and military. Oh, so it's worse, is what you're telling me. Mostly fight against mafia and terrorism. I mean, like, terrorism is, like, such a blanket term anyways. Like, anything could be classified as terrorism. And I think, like, the biggest perpetrators of terrorism is, like, the CIA.
Should that happen? Should Canada lead a foreign intervention in Haiti?
I think the situation needs to be stabilized.
Can't live in a place from when you join it to avoid corruption. True, that's true.
And because you can see how right now the capital of Haiti, Port-au-Prince, is completely under the control and siege of criminal organizations, and we are talking about hundreds of criminal organizations.
What? Okay, it's literally because Haiti was like fucking bombarded by like a shit ton of embargoes and is hit by like annual hurricanes and like receives no aid for it either. So yeah, there's going to be like a lot of poverty there, which will inevitably lead to crime.
Like more than 100 that are heavily armed and well organized, and of course, if there is an intervention, it has to be under certain conditions. It's important to establish the terms of the collaboration. It's key. Know who you are dealing with and ensure that the collaboration is not manipulated, but really inclusive and transparent from a technical, operational, and logistical standpoint. Also, it's important, and it's at the heart of the discussion. At the CARICOM meeting in the Bahamas, to see how we can count on Canada's support for these actions, which will have to be well coordinated, and I would say in an orderly fashion. Canada can play a role in providing financial and advisory support, provide traditional trainers, required equipment, and means also to strengthen intelligence. Training is essential. Sending advisors to the field is also to be considered, and listing also the necessary support of the population and police teams.
I mean, we could also literally just send them like aid in the form of like money, medical supplies, clean drinking water, food, basic shit that people need, and it would help alleviate some of like the crime that's going on in there, right? It just won't like solve everything. Like, if anything, we should be like helping them gain critical infrastructure that they desperately need, right?
From countries in the region would be better accepted by the Haitian population, especially if they come in solidarity and as reinforcements. Because there's a common cultural and historical, there are common cultural and historical traits, and these are important factors.
So in terms of stabilizing the situation in the capital, in Port-au-Prince, where you say criminal gangs have essentially overrun the population, you don't see a solution where Canada and a primarily white military or police force situation goes in. You think the solution is police forces from other Caribbean nations to go in and work with support from countries like Canada, financial, advisory, equipment. Is that what you see as the path forward on that initial bit?
And this is exactly what the discussion will be about. Discussion will be about how about Canada taking the lead of an intervention force, but in collaboration with what the countries of the region can offer, because they have similar experiences. They have also developed, some of them, good practices to tackle these kind of challenges. They do have the experience and the expertise, but they cannot do it alone. They will need also Canada to be on board and to support these actions.
Are you saying Canada should lead that, Ms. Jean, that Canada should be in command of that operation, or simply in an advisory capacity and supporting it?
I believe that if the Prime Minister of Canada has accepted this invitation, it is also to consider that possibility and see what can be done. And when you examine the situation of the Haitian police right now. They have been professionalized by the international UN mission of stability in Haiti, MINUSTA, with the assistance also of Canadian police forces, but they are not trained to respond to the situation.
Probably why.
The Haitian National Police Force is not equipped. It does not have the intervention material required. No drones, no armored vehicles with battering rams, to knock down barricades set up by gangs. They have no protective equipment for a special intervention and population protection brigade that should have at least 1,000 police officers equipped with shields and ballistic helmets, weapons and ammunition adapted, to gangs that are very well trained in the use of weapons.
The policing challenges are numerous, so too are the political challenges when it comes to stabilizing Haiti, including the lack of support for Prime Minister Ariel Henry. Henry was put in charge after the 2021 assassination of President Jovenel Moïse.
I wonder what happened there. I wonder what happened.
Jean and others have criticized Henry as illegitimate. How do you get to this situation of this multinational police force with Canada at the lead or some other country at the lead?
I wonder. I wonder what happened.
The current political situation that exists in the country, because you said the current Prime Minister Ariel Henry has never had political legitimacy in the eyes of the Haitian people because he wasn't elected. We're well past the point where the country should have had fresh elections through everything. So how do you move forward with that sort of a political dynamic and bring in this multinational, international police force to function? How would it have legitimacy if the government doesn't have legitimacy, in your view?
Yeah, I think we have to understand that the Prime Minister, the de facto Prime Minister in exercise right now, has been also installed by, representatives, ambassadors of countries, including Canada.
Yes, Canada recognized Prime Minister Henry.
That's right, absolutely. And there was a moment of emergency, and that is the first thing that they thought about, is to install this Prime Minister who doesn't have the confidence of the population, and that's a major problem.
In the immediate moment, if you do want to bring in a stabilizing force, who do you negotiate with and get permission with if Mr. Henry is not legitimate? So this is, I guess, a central question, like whether you believe he's legitimate or not, he is nominally at least in charge of the country. So for Canada and other countries to come in there in some sort of capacity.
I mean, obviously the Haitians would disagree with you on that one if they're seeing him as an illegitimate leader. After the assassination of what I would assume being their democratically elected leader.
Capacity to help, I guess it has to be with his blessing. So what is the next political steps you would like to see get people into the country to help with stabilize things?
Well, of course, what you're saying is so right. And this is at the heart of the problem. So because, and there must be, the sufficient humility to admit that it was probably wrong. The best would have been certainly, to have in place a government of a transitional, government that is responsible, and also that is representative also of the different sectors of the Haitian society, and that is credible, that has the trust of the people to organize the elections. Right now, what will happen with Prime Minister Henry is that you will have first, in the current situation that is completely overwhelming, this Prime Minister and his government, having election is not even possible. It's totally impossible. And every expert will say that to you, because there's a need to contain the gangs, systematically establish expendable security perimeters in all neighborhoods.
I think he's only saying that because he knows for a fact he would lose. Because if a vast majority of the country does not like him, and he's saying, oh, we can't do elections because of these gangs that are that are, running around in the country. Like, we can't have an election. Like, that's a stupid reason, right?
Of the capital, seeking there's an urgent need also to seek thereby to control the expansion of gangs, engage in citizen peacemaking actions, and the key thing is to achieving this is what? Coordination, communication, and intelligence. At the moment, because of the lack of intelligence, police interventions are carried out blindly with disastrous consequences. And let me go back.
I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's just how like cops operate.
To the Haitian police. Really, right now, I explained that to you, they are not equipped.
Right.
There's a need for reinforcement. There's a need for support. And we cannot, unless, we solve this problem of insecurity, we cannot even envisage, elections in Haiti. It would be like a disaster with so many, more than 100 criminal organizations, well armed, well organized, well equipped, that are in total control of the capital. How can you imagine elections in that situation?
The situation is clearly dire. Last month, Jean and
I
dozens
love
of
this
other
agitprop.
high-profile signatories issued an open letter saying Haiti needs urgent international aid to avoid becoming a failed state. When you lay it out this way, that the police...
I mean, yeah, no shit, Haiti needs international aid. Of course. Like, what? That could literally be said about, like, literally, like, anything, anywhere in, like, say, Africa, or, like, Latin America, or, like, literally anywhere that's not part of the global north. What?
Police are overwhelmed and insufficient. The government is illegitimate and ineffective. The climate does not allow for free and fair elections, and gangs are largely running everything right now in the capital. How close is Haiti to being a failed state, or are we at that point already?
Haiti is already a failed state. This is what, the question you are asking is, where is the government of Haiti? Where is the leadership? The governance itself is totally failed. There's a crisis of governance, with the state, like there is one also within the police, and that's the problem. It is a failed state, and the reasons also and the responsibilities also have to be well understood and shared. And that's the issue right now. The exercise of the meeting in the Bahamas will be about that, exploring how actually, there can be a well thought, well coordinated, and in an orderly fashion, strategy to tackle this situation of insecurity in Haiti, in order to go back, to the constitutional order, and in order also to consider having elections in this country. So, of course, many people are saying, well, Ariel Henry has shown, that he's failing. It's impossible for him to govern right now. And it needs a transitional, structure, entity that is representative, that is credible, to take charge of the transition, and organize the elections when times come and when the conditions are addressed, to have these elections. Because under the current situation, until the insecurity situation is resolved, security restored, and governance is in better hands, because the failure is obvious. There's no possibility of going to the polls with the political class currently holding on the power, and the dubious practices and criminal collusion habits it has developed. Because, the total impunity systematically granted by the Martelly regime, the Moise government also, to all criminal actors, murderers, traffickers, organized criminals, including police officers, politicians, the disaster of bad governance, corruption, the voluntary weakening of institutions, including the judiciary, have not helped. And just, as I was saying, as the state governance is corrupt, so is police governance. the whole chessboard is largely corrupt.
I'm going to summarize my understanding of your position, what you hope to see come out of this, to make sure I've got it right. You would like to see Canada leading in some capacity an international policing force from the region to stabilize Port-au-Prince, to build security, to expand security perimeters, to bring order to the city, to pave the way for some sort of transitional government to take control, to pave the way for free and fair elections, to try to return some level of constitutional legitimacy and capacity as a state to Haiti and the Haitian people. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir. That's absolutely correct. And what I'm saying is you had a lot of civil society organizations mobilizing together, coming with an option for a transitional, strategy with a government of transition. I don't know if you say that, that's the way you say that in English, but you understand what I mean. That is responsible, excellent reputation, representative of all sectors of, the major sectors of the Haitian society. And it's happened before. It wouldn't be the first time. And that would actually have, the capacity with the full trust of the population of conducting, and organizing the elections. And of course, with yes, the support of allies, of countries who declare themselves as friends of Haiti. And I think this is the way to go.
Michaëlle Jean, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, there's a couple articles I want to read. So, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has given a shit ton of money to some oil companies because allegedly they're supposed to be cleaning up their stuff, and they're not doing it, so she just gave them fucking more money to do it. Alberta's premier is rejecting opposition claims. Her planned $100 million pilot project to clean up old oil wells was influenced by her United Conservative Party leadership campaign, arguing that federal money to get the job done missed many of the province's worst sites. It's probably just going to be the exact same stuff. Speaking on her province-wide radio call-in show Saturday, Danielle Smith noted the worst wells have been inactive for decades and repeated her argument that government shares some of the blame for the fact regulators let companies off without fulfilling their responsibilities. The government's that you should be blaming in this instance is the Alberta government. It's 100% up to the Alberta legislature to enforce that. Smith said many of the companies left those wells without cleaning them up aren't around anymore because we're targeting so closely on the worst wells. We're looking at sites, for instance, that have been inactive for 20 years that were drilling prior to 1990, so these are kind of the worst sites, Smith told listeners Saturday after being asked about the NDP's claims the program is linked to her leadership fundraising. I have a feeling that they could be right on that. Now we're left with somebody holding the bag that many not have been responsible for the initial liability. We have regulators who allow for those transfers to occur. We have regulators in the past who didn't require cleanup. I think we have to take some of the responsibility as government for the fact that we did not manage it the way we should have historically. NDP electric critic Kathleen Galen said Friday it's a huge concern that before Smith re-entered politics, she lobbied for an oil well cleanup bailout that she made a government priority when she became premier. The sources of the 1.3 million she raised for her leadership campaign last year have not been revealed, and her office has not responded to requests to address questions about how her campaign fundraising was affected by governing priority. Yeah, I wonder why. A liability manager incentive program poses to give $100 million in royalty breaks to companies that fulfill their legal obligations to restore old oil and gas wells. A royalty is the price Alberta charges a company to develop a resource. Chances are they're just going to give this money away either way, which is insane. They're going to be giving this money away either way. Which, you know, this is where your tax money's going to, Albertans. Instead of, you know, your crumbling healthcare system, it's going to big oil. Analyst with Scotiabank said in a report that the proposal goes against the core capitalist principle that private companies should take full responsibility for the liabilities they are willingly accept. An independent legislature member and former member of the UCP caucus, Drew Barnes, had called the plan corporate welfare. I mean, he's not wrong. He's literally right on that. Smith on Saturday praised the federal government's site rehabilitation program, which provided $1 billion for well site recovery, but she noted the program is about to end and that it missed the worst sites. She said flared pits, which she described as pools of water where there's waste materials were just thrown in, are the biggest problem and have sat some cases for 40 to 60 years. She said they're not being cleaned up because it's a huge environmental liability expense. Companies are worried that they're not going to be able to get the sign off on it. That sounds like a them problem. Landowners, she said, are left with the redundant sites. Man, I'm tired. The reason I advocated for this program when I first heard about it was because feeling so passionately about landowners' rights, I feel so passionately that this has been a long-term problem. No one has ever found a way to address it, Smith told listeners. Yeah, totally. It's totally not like you're giving them like welfare. All right. So for those who don't know, Netflix said crackdown on password sharing. If anything, this is just going to make them lose subscribers more than anything.
It was the streaming service that stood out with movies and TV series. Netflix was also seen as providing good value because one household membership could mean many people could watch using the same account all at once. But soon,
those who shared their Netflix.
And this is also really ironic coming from the company who also promoted like password sharing.
Netflix passwords and accounts to those outside of the home, the party's over.
And the funny thing is that like regardless if you have like a you know, the you're sharing like an account and whatever, if you know, if you go outside and like want to watch Netflix and shit, it's gonna cost you like $7.99, which fuck that noise, honestly.
Well, it will be by March 31st.
The company will crack down and start limiting the use of accounts for anyone outside the account holder's household. Those users would have to pay $8 a month.
See? Which is fucking stupid.
Extra.
If Netflix is able to convert some of these customers who otherwise will be canceling their account into paying customers, even if it is less than the full rate, then you bet that other streaming services are taking note.
The change.
The thing is I have a feeling this is going to implode on themselves, or implode on them, and other companies that like other streaming companies are going to see that and they're going to be like, yeah, no. Unless they decide to follow in their companies and then fucking destroy their streaming services too.
Isn't going over well with many current customers, like those with kids living away.
At a time when groceries are at an all-time high, our mortgage just went up, like every little bit is another little bit that we can't afford.
Christine Hunt will have.
I mean, like, it's telling that like when you can't afford like, I don't know, a fucking bag of like Doritos and then like your case of Pepsi and now you can't, you know, watch, you know, a show you want to watch because you're being charged an extra $8 for it. Like, people will inevitably be like incredibly pissed off about this, and who knows where that's going to lead.
2 students in university in the fall. Her kids use Netflix more than she and her husband do. They may cut their account altogether.
If there's other streaming services that are more reasonable, which it seems like there is, then that just seems to be the better option.
The inflation rate is going up right now. It's just an unnecessary added cost for students.
6 years ago, Netflix tweeted that Love is sharing a password. The company says it has about 100 million password sharers amongst 250 million customers, and that represents revenue Netflix could be earning. Customers have choices too.
We live in an era where like everything is replaceable essentially. I can go to a streaming service that's entirely free.
Like Pluto TV, which just debuted in Canada. There's Tubi, there's Roku channel.
And that's not even getting into like all the pirate sites either. Like, for those who don't remember like the Crunchyroll like debacle, like you know, they have like, not only do like streaming services have to compete with each other, they also have to compete with pirate sites as well. You know, if you can make your service better than what your competitors are offering and what the pirate sites are offering, people are going to pay for your service. But the funny thing is that the pirate sites are actually like unironically like some of the better options in order to, you know, watch stuff, because the players are better, you know, it's all free. They have like a lot of shows and movies that you want to watch. So,
and of course, each of the different networks like Global have their own streaming option as well, where you don't need a cable subscription in order to watch TV.
Many choices that didn't exist when Netflix came along. Sean O'Shea, Global News.
I think if anything, this is just going to hurt them more than anything, because there's been a lot of pushback on it. Okay, so I'm kind of curious to see what they're going to say about the Freedom Convoy movement. Apparently, there was like a little bit of one in Winnipeg, and it didn't really go too well as they froze. Was because they didn't expect a Winnipeg Winnipeg winter.
Quite something to be back here on these streets a year later. All this was completely occupied. And as we look at the anniversary, there have been some attempts to have similar protests, but they've been much smaller. And it's brought up the question about what is the movement now? That's what we're here to find out.
Something that we can clown on people for.
Criminologist Michael Kempa lived through the convoy protest and continues to study it closely.
Could something like that happen again?
Nothing on the scale of what we saw in February of
Absolutely can happen again. What are you talking about?
2022.
Kempa says it isn't just the lack of a single leader, but now a single cause.
So at the time, across Canada, you could estimate that there were probably about 2 million people who had significant sympathy for the anti-vax movement. You're now probably left with somewhere between 250
Bunch of losers.
500,000 people who remain extraordinarily angry with government. They don't trust experts. They don't align with having so much science governing our policies. They would rather have families making up their own decision, and or they simply hate the Trudeau government.
They were always there, Kempa argues, but seized on the galvanizing issue of COVID restrictions and tried to attach their own issues to that anger.
You might think of it like a high degree of gold dust into the air. So financial capital, a huge amount of donations coming in. But you take away the main issue of
Mostly from the
COVID-19
States.
mandates, organizers will move to the fore and they'll say, what issues can we use to try to scoop some of this gold dust in our direction? What would work to pull people back into the movement?
This is really about hate and love. And love, not necessarily love that is based on mutual understanding, but love because you hate the same enemy.
Researcher Merlina Lim tracks
What?
far-right and convoy social media activity. She says there's been an uptick with the anniversary.
Is there a single cause that's unifying them now?
All of these groups still really are unified by the fact they want to get rid of Trudeau. Without anger, the sense of feeling injustice, this type of group cannot thrive.
Kempa
I mean, most fascist groups just don't thrive overall. Like, they always end up failing.
That police are just far better prepared for a large protest, and the most recent ones have been much smaller, such as this one targeting the Prime Minister and his cabinet in Hamilton.
What's left of the protest movement? What is it now?
So
it seems a bit
A
disorganized.
joke.
Is that accurate?
It's extremely disorganized.
There never was a single unifying leader, and now internal division is spilling out in public. Convoy architect James Bowder wrote about personal character attacks made against me and others on Team Canada Unity as he canceled a planned repeat protest in Ottawa.
Pussy. Come on. Why not do it, pussy? What do you got to lose?
Tamara Leach, revered by many, recently wrote that fellow leaders Brigitte Belton, Benjamin Dichter, and Chad Eros appear to be on a path to sabotage everything that our little group endeavored to accomplish. The splintering is readily apparent on social media, where the movement
This is
now meets
awesome.
primarily.
I'm going to continue to advocate against people that want to treat the Freedom Convoy as a way to prop themselves up. To talk about their Bitcoin ventures, to talk about their books, to talk about their projects. Like the Freedom Convoy owes them something.
They were locking us down more and more. The craziness was insane. And we're like, you know what? We need to make a stand.
The movement, splintered as it may be, is far from dead. More protests at the Coutts, Alberta border crossings showed hundreds will still come out.
I wish people would just wake up and see the government for who they really are.
Wake up and take the red pill like I have. And leave the Matrix, brother. See this fascist socialist Trudeau dictatorship, brother. Yay.
And there are plans for a reunion of sorts on land outside Winnipeg rather than in front of Parliament.
Yeah, it didn't really work out for them.
Proclaims universally to be true, proud Canadians, but debates which costs are theirs.
So, David, 1 year later, do we know of any plans by the members of the convoy to meet up again?
Well, certainly not in Ottawa, and we've just heard some of the reasons why. It's much more difficult to do that right now, although we are hearing that Wellington Street will reopen in the coming weeks. That, of course, is the street right in front of Parliament itself. As for this coming weekend, a long weekend in many provinces, we know that there are plans to hold some events. The largest looks set to occur just outside of Winnipeg. People expected to come in, certainly from that part of Manitoba and Northern Ontario, may come from further afield. Doesn't look like there are big plans in the way of bigger organizers to be there.
The funny thing is that they do try and plan something this weekend. I think it's supposed to be incredibly fucking cold. So have fun experiencing what I experience on a yearly basis.
There, what will come of it? We're going to have to see.
Thanks, David.
What does it take to feel safe in your own city? On streets you know like the back of your hand, when you've started to doubt the guardians of those streets, the very people meant to protect you. That's a question the women taking this martial arts class in South London have begun to grapple with in recent weeks and months.
For the longest time, I thought, oh no, but really, I can't go to the police if there's an issue.
Uh-huh.
I don't feel that way anymore.
Dasha works in international development.
I kind of have to rely on my own wits and on my own ability to be aware of my surroundings and defend myself if I have to.
So if you were in a situation where you saw a lone police officer and he approached you,
walk away.
Really?
Kick his ass.
Quickly. Yes.
Scotland Yard, home to Britain's largest police force and one of the world's best known, the inspiration for countless fictional detectives, bolstering a reputation seemingly etched in stone, but no more.
London's Metropolitan Police is a force in disgrace, accused of fostering a culture of misogyny so pervasive that it shielded sexual predators in its own ranks for years.
I mean, that's just standard cop shit, though.
Good evening. The case of PC David Carrick has shone a searing light upon yet more scarcely believable failings by London's Metropolitan Police.
It doesn't get much darker than the deeds this now former police officer admitted to last month. 49 offenses, including 24 counts of rape. Also shocking...
24? Bro, what? Did he take Andrew Tate's advice to heart? Like, Jesus.
Just how many red flags were missed inside the Met.
During his reign of terror, which lasted 18 years, the Metropolitan Police had 9 opportunities to stop him and didn't.
We're all equally horrified.
The Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Mark Rowley, is under pressure.
I've got tens of thousands of fantastic men and women, but I've got hundreds who shouldn't be here. I'm going to sort it out.
What makes that promise so hard to believe for some is that it comes nearly 2 years after the arrest of another serving Metropolitan Police officer for the rape and murder of a young woman. Sarah Everard was walking home from a friend's house on March 3rd, 2021. CCTV footage tracked some of her journey, and a dashboard camera caught Police Constable Wayne Cousins stopping her on the street. He used his warrant card to falsely arrest her, citing a breach of COVID rules. He handcuffed her, put her in the back of a rental vehicle, and drove her to her brutal end eventually strangling her with his police duty belt. It sent a shudder across the United Kingdom, an outpouring of grief and outrage. People gathered at this park close to where Everard was taken. The crowds grew, even though COVID rules meant large gatherings were banned. And the police made a fateful decision to break up a vigil officers would later say had turned into an anti-police protest. They moved into the crowd with force, leaving in their wake some searing images.
I mean, like, is it really surprising though? Like, it's just standard cop shit.
Patsy Stevenson found herself thrust into the spotlight, reluctantly so, her life transformed by the experience. She's now an activist, campaigning for change.
The past 2 years, we've seen nothing happen. We've seen a lot of empty promises, but I've not seen a change at all.
After Stevenson's picture was splashed across newspapers, she says she was trolled on a dating app. Men pictured in police uniforms liking her profile.
And a few of them said in their bio, they said like, oh, I'm an officer with handcuffs and no, not the fluffy kind, and things like that.
That it's all taken a toll is clear.
Now, I feel like exhausted all the time, but I think once you're in it, you can't really stop. It's like a need, like I can't stop fighting for women's rights, and I don't think I ever will now.
So where then lies the road to redemption for a police force with a reputation so tainted?
It's not one bad apple, it's not a couple of bad apples. There are numerous officers and they need to be taken care of. The system just needs to be cleansed.
Parm Sandhu is a former chief superintendent with the Metropolitan Police. Rare for a woman of color, she says. That David Carrick managed to abuse women for nearly 2 decades without someone blowing a whistle, especially when he was being vetted and promoted, is no surprise to her.
They were either too frightened of him or they were part of his gang, his little group and culture. And unfortunately, the culture of the Metropolitan Police enables these sort of behaviours to go unchecked, because the culture is keep your mouth shut and don't say anything.
It's unsurprising.
30 years ago, a major inquiry into the Met's handling of an investigation into the murder of a young black man named Stephen Lawrence pointed to institutional racism. Sandhu says force leaders are still in denial.
I mean, I think it's more than just institutional racism. I'm sure there's other problems, like, but you know, it's unsurprising that, you know, racist piece of shits like that would be there.
Police service should be saying, right, we are racist, we are sexist, we are misogynistic. They're not. They're trying to
Police 100% are. What?
batten down the hatches and they're being defensive.
The Metropolitan Police say they are now reviewing more than 1,000 serving police and staff previously accused of domestic abuse or sex offenses.
That's not getting into the ones that got away with it either.
Harriet Wistrich, a solicitor and founding director of the Center for Women's Justice, says they must go deeper than that.
It's accountability not just of, obviously, the officers who've committed crimes and so on, but it's accountability of those who have been bystanders, who've seen what's going on and let it happen.
The leadership here at Scotland Yard continues to emphasize that the vast majority of police officers are good and true and to be trusted.
So when I do that...
No. That's not how that works. A couple of bad apples spoil the bunch. Because they're all... Because, you know, once one's rotten, it's going to spread that rot to everywhere else. What?
But the very real prospect remains that even fewer women will be inclined to report a rape or assault than they have in the past.
given that there seems to be such a high proportion of police officers in this city that are bad apples, it knocks your confidence a bit in reporting things, I think.
The man who was able to perpetrate that many crimes against women, how many people along that way covered that up for him? Well, his crimes are terrible, but it's the institution that has actively worked to cover up his misdeeds so consistently for such a long time.
Just regular cop shit, boys.
It's not safe for women.
Up, push, down, here.
Margaret Evans, CBC News.
We begin the program, though, with breaking news. RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki says she's retiring after what has been a turbulent year. She's called.
I wonder why it's been such a turbulent year for her. We did cover what happened.
Calling it a personal decision to retire, but one
Yeah,
that
I'm
wasn't
sure.
easy to make. The CBC's Catherine Tunney covers the RCMP for us here in Ottawa, and she joins me now. So, Kat, let's start with what else is Lucki saying about this decision?
Yeah, well, in a letter that she sent out to the Mounties today, you know, she's emotional. She's even a little bit cheeky, and she's definitely reflective. You know, she talks about she was asked to modernize the force. You know that is a huge mandate, and that she faced some problems. She says, you know, policing in general, you know, the profession is kind of under siege these days. She talks about how she kind of wishes.
I wonder why it's under siege. I wonder why.
Able to talk a bit more about some of the things that she saw, and she says, you know, the Brenda in me had to take quite a few hits on the chin at times when I needed to stay quiet and not engage in the noise.
Right, okay, so legacy here is a complicated one, a real trailblazer, right? First woman to rise to this office, but in the middle of a lot of controversies over the past couple of years. How do you assess it?
Yeah, it's a legacy that is marred by controversy. It started, you know, as you said, a trailblazer. She is, you know, the first woman to take on that role permanently. She was given a mandate to kind of modernize the force. This came after that, you know, quite shameful sexual assault, you know, controversy scandal the RCMP had. There was that apology, the settlement, and a lot of people, you know, did not like the way that the RCMP was treating its own members, you know, its female members particularly. So she was, you know, kind of meant to take that over. And since then, there's been a few others. So of course, we talked, you know, faced a lot of questions this summer about her political or alleged political interference into the Nova Scotia mass shooting. The allegation being that the government, you know, leaned on her officers to release the types of weapons that were used. You know, she denies that. You know,
unsurprisingly,
that might not be true, but of course that has followed her and her legacy over the past year. She, you know, her performance at the public. The Emergencies Act inquiry also came under question. The fact that, you know, she you know, sent a letter to Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino saying that, you know, there might have been other options to deal with this, you know, before invoking the Emergencies Act, but then didn't tell Cabinet.
Yeah, but literally no one did anything about it. That's why it was invoked. What?
Right as they were deciding to go ahead with that. So it's a, you know, it's a legacy that is definitely, you know, has some marks on it.
Right, you talk about the systemic challenges we face with the harassment controversies inside the police force, systemic racism, the Mass Casualty Commission, and then her decision to stay silent, which was heavily criticized in particular by Jody Thomas, the National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister, when she testified at the Rouleau Commission. And brings me to my next question on timing, right? Like we've just passed the 1-year anniversary of the invocation of the Emergencies Act. We're anticipating Judge Rouleau will release his report either the end of this week or.
Not gonna lie, it's been a very convenient, time for her to step down.
Early next week, and we'll find out what happened. I mean, just coincidence here? I mean, what do we make of this? Because we know her term was going to be up soon anyway, right?
Yes, I mean, the RCMP commissioner, you know, kind of serves at the pleasure of the government, but we have been hearing that, you know, it had been 5 years. Most commissioners serve about 5 to 6, maybe eight years. So, you know, it was coming to a natural point where you might question, you know, whether, you know, she was just doing the job. In her own words, she says that she herself was conflicted about the timing and that she didn't want to be seen as running away. You know, of course, you know, we'll have to have her explain more. Hopefully she'll give some goodbye interviews. But of course, the fact that we're going to get this report maybe as soon as Friday, which I'm sure will be looking at it will be looking at the RCMP's response and seeing, her role if she could have done more. And of course, later next month, actually, I will be receiving the Mass Casualty Commission report.
Right.
That one is looking into the mass shooting in Nova Scotia. Of course, there's been lots of criticism about how the RCMP responded to that and if they did enough. So it was going to be a hard year for her. So, without knowing exactly what was in her mind, you can see that maybe she felt that this was time to get out.
Right, and I think she says her last day will be March 17th, right? So
Indeed,
that
yeah.
will be Brenda Lucky's last day as the head of the RCMP. All right, CBC's Catherine Tony. Kat, thanks so much for coming in.
Okay. Yeah, let's just wrap things up. A little bit tired and whatnot. Well, hope everyone had fun stopping by. And yeah, tomorrow will probably be more engaged or 3 houses. I'm not sure yet. Anyways, see everyone later.